I got fired for saving a pregnant woman's life in the rain. What I didn't know? She was the CEO of my entire company, and she was about to change everything. If you want to see how one impossible choice in a Chicago rainstorm became the greatest second chance of my life, stay with me until the very end. And comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let me take you back to that morning when everything fell apart, and then came together in ways I never imagined. The rain came down like God himself was weeping over Chicago that Tuesday morning, turning the streets into rivers of gray despair and washing away any illusion I had that this day might be different from all the others. I was already running late, 16 minutes behind schedule according to the cracked digital clock on my dashboard, and my hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles had gone white. The wipers beat a frantic rhythm across my windshield, a metronome counting down to my professional execution. One more time, Cole. Frank's words echoed in my head like a death sentence. One more late clock in, and you're done. I don't care if the damn sky is falling. Frank Morrison. Just thinking his name made my jaw clench. My supervisor at Valamont Industries was the kind of man who found joy in other people's misery, who measured his worth by how many souls he could crush under his polished Italian loafers. And I was his favorite target, the single dad, the widower, the guy barely holding it together with duct tape and prayers. I pressed harder on the gas pedal, my 2008 Honda Civic groaning in protest. The engine made a sound like it was considering retirement, which would be perfect, just perfect, add a dead car to the pile of disasters that was my life. Maya needed new shoes. The electricity bill was 3 days past due. And my daughter's school had called yesterday about some field trip I couldn't afford, speaking to me in that careful, pitying tone that made me want to drive into the lake. 23 minutes late now. I could practically see Frank's thin-lipped smile, could hear the satisfied tone in his voice as he handed me my walking papers in front of everyone. That's when I saw the hazard lights. They blinked through the curtain of rain like a distress signal, weak and desperate, cutting through the storm somewhere up ahead on the shoulder of Lakeshore Drive. Every instinct screamed at me to keep driving. I was already dead, already fired. Stopping would just make it worse, would make it certain. But then I saw her. A woman stood beside a silver Mercedes, and even through the downpour I could see she was pregnant, very pregnant. Her hands cradled her belly in that universal gesture of protection, and she was soaked through, her designer coat plastered to her frame, her dark hair hanging in wet ropes around her pale face. She looked lost, terrified, alone. And just like that, I was back in that hospital room 3 years ago, watching my wife Sarah's face contort with fear as the machines around her bed screamed warnings the doctors couldn't fix. Watching her hand instinctively move to protect a belly that would never grow, protecting a future we'd never have because the cancer didn't care about our dreams. My foot hit the brake before my brain could catch up. "What are you doing?" I said out loud to my empty car, already pulling onto the shoulder behind her. "You're committing career suicide. Frank's going to crucify you." But I was already unbuckling my seatbelt, already reaching for the umbrella in my back seat, the good one, the one Maya had given me last Christmas with a card that read, "To Daddy, so you don't get wet going to work. Love, your sunshine." The rain hit me like a physical blow the moment I stepped out, immediately soaking through my shirt despite the umbrella. The woman turned at the sound of my door, and I saw her face clearly for the first time. Mid-30s, maybe. Beautiful in that effortless way that spoke of money and privilege, even drenched and desperate on the side of the road. But it was her eyes that stopped me cold. They held the same look Sarah's had, raw fear wrapped around fierce determination to protect. "Car trouble?" I called over the storm, jogging toward her with the umbrella raised. She flinched, then seemed to assess me in a single glance, wet office shirt, cheap tie, worried face, and decided I wasn't a threat. "It just died," she said, and her voice was steady despite the trembling I could see running through her. "I called to put away, but they said it could be an hour or more because of the weather. I need to get to a hospital. I'm having contractions." My heart dropped into my stomach. "How far apart?" 10 minutes, maybe less now. She wrapped both arms around her belly, her face tightening with pain. "But I'm only 34 weeks. It's too early. It's too—" "Okay." I moved the umbrella to cover her instead of me, immediately getting drenched for my trouble. My car's right here. Let me get you somewhere safe. She looked at my ancient Civic, then back at her Mercedes, warring with herself. Pride versus necessity. Desperation won. Are you sure? I don't want to... Ma'am, your baby doesn't care about inconvenience. I was already guiding her toward my car, one hand hovering near her elbow without actually touching, ready to catch her if she stumbled. Can you walk okay? I think so. Another contraction hit, and she gasped, doubling over slightly. I caught her arm, steadied her, felt how violently she was shaking, from cold or fear or both. Easy. We're almost there. Just a few more steps. I got her settled in the passenger seat, cranking the heat up high, even though it would make my old car smell like burning dust. She was shivering so hard her teeth chattered, and I felt a surge of fury at whoever should have been here with her, at whoever had left her alone. What hospital? I asked, already pulling back onto Lakeshore Drive. Northwestern Memorial. Do you know where? I know it. Of course I knew it. It's where Sarah died. Where I'd held her hand and watched her slip away while doctors murmured apologies they'd practiced in medical school. I pushed the thought away. We'll get you there. Do you have someone I should call? Your husband? Partner? Something flickered across her face, pain that had nothing to do with contractions. No, there's no one. It's just me and... She pressed her hand to her belly. Just us. The admission hung in the air between us, heavy with implications I didn't have time to examine. I focused on driving, on weaving through traffic that seemed determined to move at the pace of continental drift. What's your name? She asked suddenly. Ethan. Ethan Cole. Alexandra. She didn't offer a last name, and I didn't ask. Thank you, Ethan. You didn't have to stop. I glanced at her, this stranger I'd probably never see again, and something in my chest twisted. Yes, I did. We drove in silence for a few minutes, the only sounds the rain hammering on the roof and her breathing, which had turned sharp and shallow. I could see her in my peripheral vision, see the way she kept checking her phone, her face growing more pinched with each glance. Another contraction? I asked. 8 minutes this time. Her voice was tight. They're speeding up. I pressed harder on the gas. 31 minutes late now. Frank would be in rare form. I'd probably have security escort me out. The thought should have terrified me, but all I could think about was the woman next to me, fighting to keep her baby safe for just a little longer. Tell me something, Alexandra said suddenly. Distract me. What do you do for work? I almost laughed. I work at Valamont Industries. Or I did until about half an hour ago when I decided stopping to help you was more important than keeping my job. Her head whipped toward me. What? I was already late. My supervisor's been looking for a reason to fire me for months. This'll do it. I tried to keep my voice light, but I could hear the edge of panic underneath. But it's fine. It's worth it. Your baby's worth it. Ethan. She looked stricken. I can't let you lose your job because of me. When we get to the hospital, I'll call your work. I'll explain... Explain what? That I was 45 minutes late because I stopped to help someone? They don't care about reasons. They care about numbers on a timesheet. I shook my head. Besides, it's done. And I meant what I said. You and your baby matter more than any job. She was quiet for a long moment, studying me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. You're a good man, Ethan Cole. I'm an unemployed man who's going to have to explain to his 8-year-old daughter why we can't afford her field trip to the Science Museum. The bitterness leaked out before I could stop it. Sorry, that's not your problem. You have a daughter? Maya, she's the best thing in my life. I felt the familiar ache in my chest, the one that came whenever I thought about all the things I couldn't give her. Her mom died 3 years ago. Cancer. It's been just the two of us since then. I'm so sorry. Alexandra's hand reached out, hesitated, then settled lightly on my arm. The touch was brief but warm. That must be incredibly hard. We manage. I pulled into the hospital's emergency entrance, my heart clenching at the familiar sight. Okay, we're here. Let me help you inside. I was around to her side of the car before she could protest, offering my arm for support. She took it, moving slowly, and I felt another contraction hit by the way her grip tightened painfully on my forearm. Breathe, I murmured, the same thing I used to say to Sarah during her treatments. In through your nose, out through your mouth.
You're doing great. We made it through the automatic doors, and immediately the sharp smell of antiseptic and floor cleaner hit me like a punch to the gut. A nurse looked up from the desk, took one look at Alexandra, and was already moving.
How far along? The nurse asked, already bringing a wheelchair. 34 weeks, Alexandra managed. Contractions about 7 minutes apart. Let's get you checked in. Sir, are you the father? No, I gave her a ride. I found her on the side of the road. The nurse's expression shifted to something warmer. Well, you're her angel today. Let me get her registered and… Wait! Alexandra grabbed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. Ethan, give me your number, please. I need to be able to thank you properly, to help with your job situation. You don't need to, please. Her eyes were urgent, almost desperate. I need to know I didn't ruin your life today. Something in her tone made me pull out my phone with my free hand, rattling off my number while she entered it into her own phone with shaking fingers. Then the nurse was wheeling her away, and Alexandra looked back over her shoulder. Thank you, she called. Thank you for stopping. I raised a hand in acknowledgement, then watched her disappear through a set of double doors, feeling strangely bereft. The same way I'd felt every time I'd left Sarah at the hospital, knowing I was walking back out into a world that kept spinning while hers was standing still. I checked my phone. 9:17 a.m., an hour and 17 minutes late. The drive to Valamont Industries felt like a funeral procession. My clothes were still damp, my hair was plastered to my head, and I could feel resignation settling over me like a wet blanket. This was it, the end of the last stable thing in my life. The office building loomed ahead, all glass and steel and corporate indifference. I parked in my usual spot, for the last time, probably, and made my way through the lobby with leaden feet. The security guard, Marcus, gave me a sympathetic look. Frank's been asking about you every 5 minutes, Marcus said quietly. He looks like a cat that caught a canary. Yeah, I bet he does. The elevator ride up to the 5th floor felt like ascending to the gallows. I caught my reflection in the polished doors. I looked exactly like a man who'd just watched his life implode. Wet, exhausted, defeated. The floor was buzzing with activity when I stepped off the elevator, but it seemed to pause the moment I appeared. Conversations died mid-sentence, heads turned. Everyone knew what was coming, and there he was, Frank Morrison, standing by my cubicle like a vulture waiting for something to die. His arms crossed over his chest and a smile on his thin face that made my skin crawl. Well, well, well. Frank's voice carried across the entire floor, intentionally loud. Look who decided to grace us with his presence. Tell me, Cole, what time is it? I kept walking toward him, refusing to look away. I know I'm late, Frank. I had an emergency. An emergency. He said it like the word was poisonous. Let me guess. Your kid was sick again? Your car broke down? You were abducted by aliens? A few nervous laughs rippled through the office. I'm done with your excuses. I told you exactly what would happen if you were late one more time. A woman needed help. I tried to keep my voice level, professional. She was pregnant and stranded in the storm. She was having contractions. I got her to the hospital. How noble! Frank's smile widened. How absolutely heroic. Tell me, Cole, do you think heroism pays your bills? Do you think your daughter eats because you played Good Samaritan instead of showing up to work on time? The mention of Maya made my hands curl into fists. Don't talk about my daughter. Why not? You're the one who keeps using her as an excuse for your incompetence. He pulled a folder from under his arm, my personnel file. 16 times late in the last 6 months. 16. Do you know what that does to department productivity? What kind of example that sets? Most of those were 5 minutes or less. I don't care if it was 5 seconds. Late is late. Rules are rules. And you, Ethan Cole, are done. He opened the folder, pulled out a termination form already filled out, and held it out like a trophy. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out. You have 10 minutes to clean out your cubicle. The words hit me like physical blows. I'd known it was coming, but hearing it said out loud made it real in a way that stole my breath. Behind Frank, I could see my coworkers watching with expressions ranging from pity to relief that it wasn't them. Frank, please. I hated the begging note in my voice, Hated that he was reducing me to this. I need this job. My daughter needs... Your daughter needs a father who can show up on time. He thrust the paper at me. Sign it. I stared at the form, at my name printed in cold black letters next to words like terminated and cause and final. My hand trembled as I reached for the pen he offered. This was it. No more steady paycheck, no more health insurance, no more pretending I had things under control. I thought about Maya, about having to tell her we might lose the apartment, about the look on her face when I explained I'd lost my job because I stopped to help someone. She'd tell me I did the right thing, my sweet, wonderful daughter who inherited her mother's huge heart. But that wouldn't pay the rent. Tick-tock, Cole. Frank tapped his watch. Some of us have actual work to do. I signed. My signature looked like it belonged to someone else, someone whose hand wasn't shaking with suppressed rage and fear. Frank snatched the paper away, his smile now so wide it looked painful. Pleasure doing business with you. Security! 2 guards I knew, had joked with in the lobby, had shared coffee with, approached with apologetic expressions. I saved them the awkwardness. I know the way out. I went to my cubicle on autopilot. There wasn't much to pack. I'd never been allowed to personalize my space the way others did. A few personal items in the desk drawer, a photo of Maya at her last birthday, grinning gap-toothed at the camera while holding a homemade cake we'd baked together, a drawing she'd made of the 2 of us holding hands under a rainbow. This is us being happy again, Daddy, she'd said when she gave it to me, because Mommy wants us to be happy. I carefully placed both items in the small box they'd provided, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes on me. The security guards waited at a respectful distance while I gathered my things, while I became a cautionary tale for everyone else in the office. The walk to the elevator was the longest of my life. No one spoke to me. No one met my eyes. I was already a ghost, erased from the company roster before I'd even left the building. In the lobby, Marcus stopped me at the door. "I'm sorry, man," he said quietly. "For what it's worth, Frank's an asshole. Everyone knows it. Doesn't change anything." I shifted the box in my arms. "Take care of yourself, Marcus." The rain had slowed to a miserable drizzle, perfectly matching my mood. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the box in the passenger seat, at the photo of Maya visible on top. She was smiling up at me, full of trust and love, and the absolute certainty that her dad could fix anything. I was going to have to tell her I couldn't fix this. My phone buzzed. A text from my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who watched Maya after school. "Maya wants to know if you can pick up pizza for dinner. She says it's been too long since Pizza Thursday." Pizza Thursday. A tradition Sarah had started back when we could afford weekly treats without calculating the cost down to the dollar. I'd been canceling more and more lately, making excuses about diet or being too tired because the truth that we couldn't afford an extra $30 was too depressing to admit. I typed back, "We'll try." Running late from work. The lie tasted bitter even through text message. I drove home in a daze, my mind spinning through increasingly desperate scenarios. How long could I make my savings last? Could I pick up freelance work? Should I sell the car? Move to a cheaper apartment in a worse neighborhood with worse schools? By the time I pulled up to our building, a aging 3-story walk-up in a neighborhood that was up and coming, the same way a struggling plant was showing potential, it was nearly 11. The rain had stopped, leaving everything gray and dripping and exhausted. Mrs. Chen opened her door before I could knock, her lined face creased with concern. "Ethan, you look terrible. What happened?" "Long day." I couldn't bring myself to say it out loud yet. "Is Maya ready?" "She's doing homework at my table, but Ethan—" She caught my arm, her grip surprisingly strong for a 70-year-old woman. "You know I don't like to pry, but if you need help, if you need someone to watch Maya for free for a while..." The kindness nearly broke me. "Thank you, Mrs. Chen. That means everything, but we'll be okay." Another lie. I was collecting them today like other people collected parking tickets. Maya looked up when I entered Mrs. Chen's apartment, and her face lit up the way it always did when she saw me. Like I was the best thing in her world. It made my chest hurt. "Daddy!" She bounced up from the table, nearly knocking over her math worksheet. "You're home early. Does this mean we can do Pizza Thursday?" She was still in her school uniform, navy jumper over a white shirt, both inherited from a friend's older daughter. Her dark hair was pulled into slightly lopsided pigtails I'd done that morning, and she had a smudge of pencil lead on her cheek from erasing too enthusiastically. She looked exactly like Sarah. Same dark eyes, same dimples, same irrepressible spirit. "Hey, sunshine." I picked her up, even though at 8 she was really getting too big for it, and hugged her tight. She smelled like Mrs. Chen's apartment, green tea and old books and safety. "Let's get home first, okay? We need to talk." Her smile faltered. "Talk about what?" "Later, after you finish your homework." She studied my face with an intensity that reminded me she was far too perceptive for her age. 3 years of watching her mother die had made her grow up faster than any kid should have to. "Okay," she said finally, then turned to Mrs. Chen. "Thank you for the snack. Anytime, Bao Bei." Mrs. Chen smiled, but her eyes on me were worried. Our apartment was on the 3rd floor, and Maya chattered the whole way up the stairs, telling me about her day, about the spelling test she'd aced, about her friend Jessica's new puppy, about the substitute teacher who let them have extra recess. I made the appropriate sounds of interest while my mind spun through the conversation I'd have to have with her soon. Inside, our apartment was exactly as we'd left it that morning. Small, clean, shabby, home. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen-living room combo with mismatched furniture from thrift stores and hand-me-downs. Maya had decorated her room with her own artwork and fairy lights we'd gotten on clearance. My room was sparse. A bed, a dresser, a photo of Sarah on the nightstand. "Homework first," I said, even though I wanted nothing more than to collapse. "Then we'll talk." She settled at our small kitchen table while I pretended to sort through mail, watching her bent head and furrowed brow as she worked through math problems. She was smart. So smart. Her teacher said she was reading at a 6th grade level, that she had a gift for science, that she could go far with the right support. Support I couldn't afford anymore. "Done!" She looked up triumphantly. "Can we talk now?" I sat down across from her, trying to figure out how to explain unemployment to an 8-year-old. "So, you know how Daddy goes to work every day at the office?" Her face fell. She knew. Somehow she already knew. "You lost your job." "How did you—" "You're using your serious voice, and you look like you did when Mommy got really sick." Her eyes were too old, too knowing. "It's okay, Daddy. We'll figure it out. We always do." That simple faith nearly destroyed me. "Maya, I need you to understand that things are going to be tight for a while, tighter than they have been. We might need to make some changes. I don't need new shoes yet." She said it quickly, earnestly. "And I don't really want to go on the field trip anyway. And we can have pasta instead of pizza, that's fine." "Stop." I reached across and took her small hands in mine. "You shouldn't have to worry about any of this. You're 8 years old. You should be worried about spelling tests and puppy dogs, not whether we can afford dinner." "But I want to help." Her chin jutted out stubbornly, pure Sarah in that moment. "Mommy always said we're a team." "We are a team." I squeezed her hands gently. "The best team. And I promise you, I'm going to find another job, a better job. We're going to be okay." She nodded, wanting to believe me, and I hated that I wasn't sure I believed myself. That night, after I'd tucked Maya into bed and read her 2 chapters of her current favorite book, after I'd kissed her forehead and promised tomorrow would be better, I sat alone in my dark kitchen and stared at my phone. The job search sites were depressing. Everything either paid less than Valamont or required qualifications I didn't have. And they all wanted someone who could start immediately, who didn't have the baggage of a termination on their record. I was scrolling through Indeed, trying not to let despair swallow me whole, when my phone rang. Unknown number, probably a spam call, but at this point I'd take any distraction. "Hello? Mr. Cole? Ethan Cole?" A woman's voice, professional but warm. "Yes?" "This is Jennifer Hartley from Valamont Industries Human Resources. I'm calling regarding your employment status." My stomach dropped. Were they calling to rub it in? To make sure I understood I was blacklisted? "Listen, I signed the termination papers. Whatever Frank Morrison wants me to Mr. Cole, I'm not calling about your termination. I'm calling to inform you that there's been a situation. Can you come to the main office tomorrow morning at 9? A situation? I really can't discuss it over the phone. But please, Mr. Cole, it's important. Can you be there? I thought about my empty day tomorrow, my empty calendar, my empty bank account. I'll be there. Excellent. Ask for me at reception. And Mr. Cole, bring your employee badge if you still have it. She hung up before I could ask what was happening, leaving me staring at my phone in confusion. I barely slept that night, running through possibilities. Maybe they realized they'd fired me wrongfully. Maybe Frank had screwed up the paperwork. Maybe it was some kind of exit interview they'd forgotten to do. Or maybe they were going to serve me with some kind of legal papers. Maybe Frank was claiming I'd damaged company property or stolen something. My anxiety spiraled in the dark while rain started up again outside, tapping against the windows like accusations. At 8:30 the next morning, I was standing in Valamont's lobby in my only good suit, the one I'd worn to Sarah's funeral and then to every job interview since. Maya was at school, Mrs. Chen had agreed to pick her up, and I was about to walk back into the building I'd been escorted out of yesterday. Marcus raised his eyebrows when he saw me. Ethan, what are you, I got a call from HR, Jennifer Hartley? His expression shifted to something unreadable. Yeah, she's expecting you. 30th floor. The 30th floor. Executive level. I'd never been above the 5th floor in my entire time at Valamont. The elevator ride up felt like ascending into another world. Each floor that ticked by took me further from the Valamont I knew, the cramped cubicles and fluorescent lighting and break room with the perpetually broken coffee maker, into something else entirely. The doors opened onto a reception area that looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Chicago skyline. Real artwork on the walls. A receptionist who looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. Ethan Cole for Jennifer Hartley, I managed. The receptionist smiled, genuinely smiled, not the fake customer service smile I was used to. Of course, Mr. Cole, she's waiting for you. Conference room B, just down that hall to your left. I followed her directions on legs that felt unsteady, my reflection in the polished floor showing a man who very clearly didn't belong here. Jennifer Hartley was waiting outside a conference room door. Mid-40s, platinum blonde hair in a perfect bun, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She extended her hand with a warm smile. Mr. Cole, thank you for coming on such short notice. Please come in. The conference room was stunning. Long table, leather chairs, another wall of windows. And at the head of the table, looking professional and poised and utterly different from the terrified woman I'd rescued yesterday, was Alexandra. I stopped dead in the doorway. What? Hello, Ethan. Her voice was calm, controlled, but her eyes held something warmer. I believe we have some things to discuss. I don't understand. I looked between her and Jennifer Hartley, my brain refusing to make the connection. What are you doing here? Jennifer Hartley's smile widened. Mr. Cole, allow me to introduce Alexandra Cross, Chief Executive Officer of Valamont Industries. The words hit me like a physical blow. CEO. The woman I'd rescued, the pregnant woman on the side of the road, the stranger I'd sacrificed my job for, was my boss. Had been my boss all along. Please, sit down. Alexandra gestured to a chair. We have a lot to talk about, starting with the fact that as of this morning, Frank Morrison no longer works for this company. I sat because my legs weren't going to hold me up much longer. What? After I was released from the hospital yesterday, the baby's fine, by the way, false alarm, just stress-induced contractions. I came back here to find you, to thank you properly, to make sure you hadn't gotten in trouble for helping me. Her expression hardened. Imagine my surprise when I learned that not only had you been fired, but that it was done with exceptional cruelty by a supervisor with a documented history of workplace harassment. I spent yesterday evening and all night reviewing your personnel file, Mr. Cole. Do you know what I found? She pulled out a folder, my folder. 6 years of exemplary service, commendations from previous supervisors, perfect attendance until 3 years ago when your wife died and you became a single parent, and after that, yes, some tardiness, almost always by less than 10 minutes, almost always with documented childcare emergencies. Nothing that warranted termination. Frank said, Frank Morrison was a bully who got his position through nepotism and kept it through intimidation. Alexandra's voice was ice. He's been toxic to department morale for years, but no one wanted to be the one to report him because he was close with some board members. Until yesterday, when he gave me the perfect excuse to remove him. Jennifer Hartley stepped forward, placing papers in front of me. Mr. Cole, we'd like to offer you reinstatement, full back pay for time lost, restoration of all benefits, and a formal apology from the company. I stared at the papers, unable to process what I was seeing. You're giving me my job back? Actually, Alexandra said, we're offering you a new position, executive assistant to the CEO. Significant pay increase, better hours, and more importantly, flexibility for family emergencies. Because unlike Frank Morrison, I understand that good employees are human beings with lives and responsibilities outside these walls. I can't. The words stuck in my throat. Why would you do this? You don't know me. Yesterday was just yesterday. You risked your job to help a stranger. Alexandra leaned forward, her gaze intense. You could have driven past me. Most people did, but you stopped, even knowing what it would cost you. You put someone else's safety above your own security. That tells me everything I need to know about your character, Ethan Cole. I have an 8-year-old daughter, I blurted out. I can't work late nights. I can't travel on short notice. I can't be the kind of assistant someone like you needs. I have a child too. Or I'm about to, in about 6 weeks if everything goes right this time. Her hand moved unconsciously to her stomach. I understand family comes first. I wouldn't offer you this position if I didn't think you could handle it. And more importantly, I need someone I can trust, someone with integrity. Those qualities are rarer than you'd think in corporate America. I looked at the papers again. The salary number made my eyes water. It was more than double what I'd been making. It was enough for Maya's field trips and new shoes and maybe even saving for college. It was enough to stop drowning. I don't know what to say. Say yes. Alexandra smiled, and for the first time since I'd walked into the room, I saw the frightened woman from yesterday under the CEO mask. Please, let me do this. Let me thank you for being a good human being when I desperately needed one. I picked up the pen Jennifer Hartley offered. My hand was shaking, but this time it wasn't from fear. Yes, I said. Yes, I'll take the position. Alexandra's smile widened into something genuine and warm. Welcome to the executive team, Ethan. I think this is the beginning of something good. I signed the papers, and just like that, everything changed. Again. Except this time, it was changing for the better. This time, I wasn't signing my life away. I was signing up for a second chance I never thought I'd get. And as I shook Alexandra Cross's hand, as I felt the firm confidence of her grip, I couldn't shake the feeling that stopping to help her yesterday had been the most important decision I'd ever make. I just had no idea how right I was. The first Monday morning of my new life started at 7:45 a.m., which felt almost decadent after years of panicked pre-dawn departures. Maya had stared at me over her cereal like I'd grown a second head when I calmly made her lunch instead of shoving a few dollars at her for the cafeteria. Are you sick, Daddy? She'd asked, genuine concern in her voice. No, sunshine, just trying out this new thing called not being stressed. I'd kissed the top of her head, marveling at how different the world looked when you weren't drowning in it. Mrs. Chen's still picking you up after school, okay? But I should be home by 6. 6 o'clock. Not 7:30 or 8 or whenever Frank finally decided to stop piling work on my desk. The concept felt almost foreign. Now I stood in the elevator ascending to the 30th floor, watching the numbers climb and trying to ignore the way my stomach churned with nerves. I'd spent the weekend researching what executive assistants actually did, watching YouTube videos and reading articles until Maya had physically removed my laptop and declared it family time. The job description Jennifer Hartley had sent over was intimidating. Calendar management, correspondence, meeting preparation, confidential projects. It was a far cry from the data entry and report generation I'd been doing on the 5th floor. The elevator doors opened and I stepped into what would be my new world. The executive floor was already humming with quiet activity, assistants moving purposefully between offices, the soft click of keyboards, the smell of expensive coffee instead of the burnt sludge from the break room downstairs. Everything here whispered money and power in a way that made my department store suit feel even more inadequate. "Ethan!" Jennifer Hartley appeared from around a corner, her smile warm and professional. "Perfect timing. Let me show you to your workspace before Alexandra arrives." She led me past several closed office doors, each with a brass nameplate announcing vice presidents and directors whose names I vaguely recognized from company emails. We stopped at a desk situated just outside a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows and a door that read Alexandra Cross, Chief Executive Officer, in elegant lettering. "This is you," Jennifer said, gesturing to the desk. It was beautiful, dark wood, clean lines, and about 3 times the size of my old cubicle. 2 monitors sat waiting, along with a phone system that looked like it required an engineering degree to operate. "Computer's already set up with your credentials. Alexandra usually arrives around 8:30, leaves around 6 unless there's an evening event. Your primary job is to manage her calendar, screen her calls and emails, and basically make sure her day runs smoothly. She'll give you specific tasks as they come up." "Okay." I set my bag down, trying to look more confident than I felt. "Anything else I should know?" Jennifer's expression shifted slightly, becoming more serious. "Alexandra is brilliant, driven, and works harder than anyone I've ever met. She's also fair, kind when she can be, and fiercely protective of the people she trusts. But she's been through a lot lately, and she's intensely private about her personal life. If she opens up to you, consider it a privilege and guard that trust carefully." There was weight behind those words, layers of meaning I didn't fully understand yet. "The baby," I said quietly. "She mentioned she's doing this alone. That's her story to tell if she chooses to." Jennifer's tone was gentle but firm. "Just be the person you were that day in the rain, honest, dependable, human. That's why she chose you." She checked her watch. "I need to get to a meeting. If you need anything, dial extension 4400. Welcome aboard, Ethan." She left me alone with my new desk and a growing sense that I was in way over my head. I spent the next 30 minutes familiarizing myself with the computer system, discovering that I now had access to calendars and files and communications I'd never even known existed. Alexandra's schedule was a color-coded nightmare of back-to-back meetings, conference calls, and site visits that made my head spin just looking at it. At exactly 8:27, I heard the elevator chime. I looked up to see Alexandra step onto the floor, and for a moment I barely recognized her. Gone was the terrified, rain-soaked woman from the roadside. This Alexandra wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my car, her dark hair pulled back in a sleek bun, her posture radiating the kind of confidence that came from running a multi-billion-dollar company. She carried a leather bag in one hand and a coffee from some boutique place I'd never heard of in the other. Our eyes met and something in her expression softened. "Good morning, Ethan. I see Jennifer got you settled." I stood automatically, feeling like I should salute or bow or something equally ridiculous. "Good morning, Ms. Cross." "Alexandra, please. Ms. Cross makes me feel like I'm about to lecture someone." She paused at my desk, studying me with that same intense gaze from our interview. "How are you feeling? Overwhelmed? Terrified? Ready to run screaming back to the 5th floor?" The honest acknowledgement of what I was feeling made me relax slightly. "All of the above?" Her laugh was unexpected and genuine. "Good. That means you're smart enough to recognize the scope of the job. Come into my office. Let's talk about what your first week looks like." I followed her into the corner office, and despite my nerves, I couldn't help but be impressed. The space was huge, but somehow still felt personal. One wall was all windows overlooking Lake Michigan, the water gray and choppy under morning clouds. Her desk was organized chaos, neat stacks of files, multiple monitors, a few personal touches that caught my eye. A framed photo of what looked like a younger Alexandra with an older couple, probably her parents. A small plant struggling valiantly to survive in the air-conditioned environment. And prominently displayed, a sonogram image, the grainy black and white showing the unmistakable curve of a baby's profile. Alexandra caught me looking, and her hand instinctively moved to her stomach. 28 weeks now. Everything's looking good after the scare last week. I'm glad. I meant it, remembering her fear in the car. Do you know what you're having? A boy.
Her smile was soft, almost vulnerable. I've been calling him Oliver in my head, though I haven't told anyone that yet. She seemed to catch herself, her expression shifting back to something more professional.
But that's not why we're here. Sit, please. I took one of the chairs across from her desk while she settled into her own seat with the careful movements of someone whose body was doing extraordinary things. I want to be transparent with you, Ethan, because I think our working relationship will be better for it. Alexandra folded her hands on her desk, her gaze direct. I chose you for this position for several reasons. Yes, because of what you did last Tuesday, but also because I need someone I can trust absolutely. This company is in the middle of several sensitive negotiations, and there are people both inside and outside Valamont who would love to have access to my calendar, my communications, my plans. You'll be privy to information that could move stock prices or torpedo deals. I need to know that you understand the gravity of that. The weight of her words settled over me like a physical thing. I understand. I also need to know that if I have a doctor's appointment or a bad day or need to leave early because I'm growing a human being inside me that stays between us. The board knows I'm pregnant. I couldn't hide it much longer anyway. But they don't know the details. They don't know I'm doing this alone, and I'd like to keep it that way. Your private life is private, I said. I would never. I know you wouldn't. That's why you're here. She pulled out a leather-bound planner, flipping it open to a page covered in neat handwriting. Now, let's talk about how this is actually going to work. Your primary job is to be the gatekeeper between me and the rest of the world. That means you'll field calls, manage meeting requests, prioritize emails, and generally decide what actually needs my attention versus what can be handled by someone else. You'll also coordinate with the other C-suite assistants, prepare briefing materials for meetings, and occasionally handle special projects I'll assign directly. She walked me through the daily routine, arriving before her to review the day's schedule, having morning coffee ready with a brief rundown of priorities, managing lunch either in the executive dining room or brought to her office during working lunches, and end-of-day debriefs to plan for tomorrow. It was simultaneously more structured and more fluid than anything I'd done before. Questions so far? Alexandra asked. About 1 million, but I settled on the most immediate one. The phone system. I'm going to need a tutorial on that thing. Her laugh was warm. Jennifer said you were refreshingly honest. Don't worry, it's intimidating, but you'll get the hang of it. I'll have it come up and walk you through it. She glanced at her computer screen, her expression shifting. Speaking of which, my 9 o'clock just arrived early. Richard Thornton, VP of Operations. He tends to be condescending to anyone he perceives as beneath him, which unfortunately includes most of humanity. Don't let him push you around. Noted. I stood, then hesitated. Alexandra? Thank you. Again, for this chance. Something flickered in her expression. Gratitude, maybe, or relief. Thank you for stopping that day. I mean that, Ethan. You gave me more than a ride to the hospital. Before I could figure out how to respond to that, her phone buzzed with the notification that her meeting had arrived. I retreated to my desk, and moments later a man in his 60s strode past me without acknowledgement, leaving a trail of expensive cologne and entitlement in his wake. The morning passed in a blur of learning experiences. The phone system turned out to be less complicated than it looked once an incredibly patient IT technician named Marcus, not the security guard, apparently the name was popular at Valamont, walked me through it. I fielded exactly 17 calls, 12 of which I had to transfer to various departments after determining they didn't actually need the CEO. I scheduled 3 meetings, rescheduled 2 others when they conflicted, and spent an embarrassing amount of time figuring out how to work the printer. At 11:30, Alexandra emerged from her office looking tired. Ethan, I need you to order lunch from Marcello's. It's in my contacts file. The Dover sole for me, and get something for yourself. We're having a working lunch to go over the quarterly reports before the board meeting tomorrow. Just the fish? Any sides and the Caesar salad? Dressing on the side, no croutons. She smiled slightly. Pregnancy heartburn is a real and terrible thing. Welcome to too much information about your boss's digestive system. I called in the order, adding a chicken parmesan for myself after checking the menu prices and wincing. This one lunch cost more than I used to spend on groceries for a week. But Alexandra had said to get something for myself, and I was slowly learning that in this world, A $30 entree was just Tuesday. Lunch arrived at 12:15, delivered by a guy in a suit who apparently worked exclusively in executive food delivery. Alexandra and I ate in her office while she walked me through the intricacies of quarterly financial reports, explaining metrics and margins in a way that actually made sense. She was a good teacher, patient, clear, willing to backtrack when she saw confusion on my face. "You're picking this up quickly," she said, spearing a piece of lettuce. "Did you study business?" "Community college, 2 years before I had to drop out to help with my mom's medical bills." The words came out before I could censor them. "Sorry, that's probably more than you wanted to know." "Don't apologize for your life, Ethan." Her tone was gentle. "What happened to your mom?" "Stroke when I was 20. She recovered mostly, but the bills were devastating. I was going to go back to school after things stabilized, but then I met Sarah, and then Maya came along, and life just sort of happened." I shrugged, trying to make it sound less tragic than it felt. "No regrets, though. My family was worth more than any degree." Alexandra was quiet for a moment, her expression thoughtful. "You know, we have a tuition reimbursement program for employees pursuing degrees. If you're interested in finishing your education, I could make sure you're enrolled." The offer caught me completely off guard. With this job and Maya, think about it, no pressure, but opportunities should be available to people who want them, regardless of where they started. She glanced at the clock on her wall. "Board meeting prep starts in 15 minutes. Can you make sure the conference room on 32 is set up? Laptop connected to the screen, water stations filled, and I'll need hard copies of these reports," she tapped her monitor, "for all 12 board members plus 3 extras." I was halfway out the door when she called my name. I turned back to find her watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You're doing really well," she said. "I know it's a lot all at once, but you're handling it. I'm glad you're here." The words warmed something in my chest that had been cold since Sarah died. "Thank you. I'm glad I'm here too." The afternoon was even more intense than the morning. The board meeting prep turned into an actual board meeting that I wasn't allowed to attend but had to support from outside, fielding questions and requests and tracking down documents with increasing urgency. By the time the executives filed out at 5:30, I felt like I'd run a marathon while juggling chainsaws. Alexandra was one of the last to emerge, deep in conversation with an older woman I recognized from the photo in her office. The family resemblance was unmistakable. "Just concerned, darling," the older woman was saying. "You're pushing yourself too hard, especially now." "Mother, I'm fine. We've discussed this." Alexandra's tone held a note of familiar frustration that transcended class and income brackets. Every adult child who'd had the same argument with a worried parent would recognize it. "You fainted last week on the side of the road." "I had a flat tire and some stress-induced contractions." "It happens." Alexandra caught sight of me and something like relief crossed her face. "Mother, this is Ethan Cole, my new executive assistant. Ethan, this is Margaret Cross, board member and professional worrier." Margaret turned to me with sharp, assessing eyes that missed nothing. "The young man who rescued you," Alexandra told me. She extended her hand, her grip surprisingly firm. "Thank you for helping my daughter when she needed it." "Anyone would have done the same," I said automatically. "But they didn't, did they?" "You did." She turned back to Alexandra. "I like him. Much better than that cold fish you had before. What was her name, Jennifer? No, that's HR. The other one, Miranda, and she wasn't cold, she was professional. There's a difference." Alexandra pinched the bridge of her nose in a gesture I was beginning to recognize as her dealing with family tell. "Ethan, can you make sure my car is brought around? I need to drive my mother home before she decides to reorganize my entire life." "I live 20 minutes away, Alexandra. I have my own car." "Then I'll walk you to it so you can lecture me in private instead of in front of my new employee." I beat a hasty retreat to call down to the parking garage, listening to them bicker with the kind of affection that comes from years of practice. It made me think of Sarah's relationship with her own mother, the same mix of exasperation and deep love, the same dance of independence and concern. By the time Alexandra returned 15 minutes later, I'd shut down my computer and was preparing to leave for the day. She looked tired in a bone-deep way that went beyond just physical exhaustion. "Your first day," she said, leaning against my desk. How are you feeling? Like I learned more in 8 hours than I did in 6 years on the fifth floor. I grabbed my jacket from the back of my chair. But good. Tired, but good. It gets easier. The first week is always the hardest. She hesitated, then added, My mother means well, but she tends to overstep. If she corners you and starts asking personal questions, you have my permission to be politely evasive. Noted. Though for what it's worth, she clearly loves you very much. That's the problem with family. They love you enough to drive you absolutely insane. But she smiled as she said it, the expression soft and genuine. Go home, Ethan. Hug your daughter. I'll see you tomorrow. The commute home felt surreal. I'd taken the train this morning at Alexandra's suggestion. Parking in the executive garage cost more per month than I used to make in a week. And now I sat in the rattling L car watching the city slide past and trying to process the massive shift in my life. This time last week I'd been drowning, terrified, certain the bottom was about to drop out completely. Now I had a job that challenged me, a boss who seemed to value me as a human being, and a salary that meant Maya could have new shoes and field trips and maybe even some stability for the first time since Sarah died. Maya was at Mrs. Chen's when I arrived, and the look on her face when I walked in at 6:15 instead of 8 made the entire day worthwhile. You're home! She launched herself at me with the confidence of a child who knew she'd always be caught. Mrs. Chen said your new job might mean better hours, but I wasn't sure if… Better hours, I confirmed, swinging her in a circle before setting her down. And enough money that we can do pizza Thursday this week if you want. Her eyes went wide. Really? Really, really? Really, really. In fact, why don't we do it tonight? Celebrate Daddy's first day? Mrs. Chen watched us from her kitchen doorway, her lined face creased with a smile. It went well then? The new position? Better than I could have hoped. I met her eyes, wanting her to understand how much her support had meant. Thank you for everything, Mrs. Chen, for watching Maya, for being patient when I couldn't pay you on time, for… She waved away my words with a dismissive hand. Family helps family. You and Maya are like family to me. Then her expression turned stern. But I'm glad things are looking up. That child needs stability, and you need to not look like you're carrying the weight of the world every day. Working on it, I promised. That night, sitting in our favorite pizza place, a local joint that was nothing fancy but made Maya's favorite mushroom and olive combination, I watched my daughter chatter excitedly about her day and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. The rest of the week passed in a whirlwind of learning and adjustment. I gradually got better at anticipating Alexandra's needs, at understanding which calls were urgent and which could wait, at navigating the complex political landscape of corporate management where everyone smiled to your face while calculating how to use you for their own advantage. Richard Thornton, the VP Alexandra had warned me about, proved to be exactly as condescending as advertised. On Wednesday, he tried to bully me into giving him time on Alexandra's calendar by claiming it was urgent, only for her to later tell me he pulled that stunt weekly and I should ignore him unless she explicitly said otherwise. Richard thinks everything he does is the most important thing in the world, she'd said dryly. It's a side effect of being the nephew of a board member. He's never had to work for anything, so he doesn't understand why anyone would dare prioritize something else over his demands. I also met the other C-suite assistants, a tight-knit group who'd apparently been taking bets on how long I'd last. Marcus from IT told me the over-under had been 3 days. Nothing personal, explained Diane, who assisted the CFO. It's just that most people can't handle Alexandra's intensity. She's brilliant, but she expects the same level of excellence from everyone around her. Her last assistant quit after 6 months because she said the stress was too much. Miranda? I said, remembering Margaret's comment. That's the one. Beautiful woman, extremely competent, but she couldn't handle the pace. Alexandra needs someone who can roll with the punches. Diane studied me with frank appraisal. You seem like you've had practice at that. Single parent to an 8-year-old, I said. Rolling with punches is basically my job description. Diane laughed. Yeah, you might actually make it then. By Friday afternoon, I was exhausted, but settling into a rhythm. Alexandra had back-to-back meetings all day, and I'd successfully managed to coordinate with 3 different departments, reschedule a conference call with Tokyo to account for time zone issues, and solve a minor crisis involving a missing presentation file that turned out to be labeled incorrectly in the shared drive. At 4:30, Alexandra emerged from her last meeting looking particularly worn down. She pressed a hand to her lower back, wincing slightly, and I was reminded forcefully that she was doing all this while 6 months pregnant. "Rough afternoon?" I asked. "The board wants to push up the timeline on the Singapore expansion, which is fine, except it means completely reworking our projections and resource allocation." She sighed, sinking into the chair across from my desk like her legs couldn't hold her anymore. "And I have a doctor's appointment at 5 that I cannot miss, but I also have 80 emails I need to respond to before the weekend." "Give me your phone." The words were out before I could second-guess them. She blinked. "What?" "Your phone. I can screen the emails, flag anything that's actually urgent, and draft responses to the routine stuff for you to review Monday. You go to your doctor's appointment. Growing a healthy baby is more important than emails." For a long moment, she just looked at me, something shifting in her expression. Then she handed over her phone. "The password is 0624. And Ethan? Thank you. That's exactly the kind of initiative I was hoping for." She left for her appointment, and I spent the next hour sorting through her inbox. Most of it was routine: meeting confirmations, information requests, interdepartmental memos. I drafted polite responses to the ones I could handle, flagged the urgent ones, and filed the rest for later review. I was nearly done when an email caught my eye. The sender was Dr. Patricia Morrison from Northwestern Memorial, and the subject line read, "Obstetrics Follow-Up." I almost skipped past it. Personal medical stuff was definitely not my business. But something made me glance at the preview text visible in the inbox. "Alexandra, I wanted to follow up on our conversation regarding additional support during your pregnancy. As we discussed, given your history," and the preview cut off there, but it was enough to make me frown. "Given her history?" "What history?" "The false alarm last week had seemed scary, but ultimately fine. But this email suggested there was something more, something Alexandra hadn't mentioned." I marked it as important and moved on, telling myself it wasn't my business. But the worry lingered. Alexandra returned just after 6, looking more relaxed than when she'd left. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Perfect. Oliver's measuring right on track, heartbeat strong, all the usual good news." Her smile was genuine, the kind that lit up her whole face. "And you? Make any executive decisions in my absence?" "Nothing too dramatic. Flagged about 15 emails that actually need your attention, drafted responses to another 20. The rest can wait." I handed back her phone. "There's one from your doctor marked important, personal medical stuff, so I didn't read beyond the preview." She glanced at the screen and something flickered across her face too quickly for me to identify. "Right. I'll handle that. Thanks, Ethan." She checked her watch. "It's after 6. You should go home. Enjoy your weekend." "You're staying late?" I tried to keep the disapproval out of my voice and failed. "Just another hour or so. I want to get ahead on the Singapore proposal." "Alexandra." I cut her off, surprising both of us with my directness. "I'm pretty new at this job, so correct me if I'm wrong. But isn't part of my job making sure you maintain some kind of work-life balance? Because working until 7 or 8 on a Friday night while pregnant seems like the opposite of that." She stared at me for a beat, and I had a moment of panic that I just overstepped catastrophically. Then she laughed, a real laugh that seemed to surprise her as much as it did me. "You're right. You're absolutely right." She grabbed her bag from her office. "Come on, if I'm leaving, you're leaving. I'm not going to be the boss who preaches balance while keeping my assistant here late." We rode down in the elevator together, the building already quiet as people filtered out to start their weekends. In the lobby, Marcus the security guard called out a good night, and Alexandra responded with a warmth that seemed to surprise him. Outside, the evening was clear and cool, the kind of early May weather Chicago specialized in, perfect enough to make you forget how brutal the winter had been. We stood on the sidewalk for a moment, neither quite ready to part ways. "Your daughter," Alexandra said suddenly. "Maya, right? What are you two doing this weekend?" "Probably the usual. Playground, library, maybe catch a movie if I can find a matinee discount." I shrugged. "Nothing exciting, but she's 8. Just spending time together is exciting enough for her." "She sounds wonderful." There was something wistful in Alexandra's voice. You're lucky to have her. I am, even on the days when she decides to test every boundary I've ever set, and I question all my parenting choices. I smiled, thinking of Maya's recent campaign to stay up past bedtime. But yeah, she's the best thing I ever did. Alexandra's hand moved to her stomach, that unconscious protective gesture I was learning to recognize. I hope I can be half as good a parent as you clearly are. The vulnerability in her voice caught me off guard. This was the woman who commanded boardrooms and made million-dollar decisions, but right now she just sounded like any other first-time parent terrified of screwing it up. You're already a good parent, I said firmly. You're already protecting him, making sure he's healthy, rearranging your whole life for him. That's what parenting is, making sacrifices and showing up and trying your best even when you're terrified. You're already doing all of that. She looked at me with something that might have been gratitude or relief or hope. Thank you, Ethan. I needed to hear that today. We said goodnight and went our separate ways. Her to a car service that pulled up the moment she stepped to the curb, me to the L station for the rattling ride home. But her words stayed with me, and I found myself thinking about her more than was probably appropriate for an employee thinking about his boss. Not in a romantic way. She was my boss, pregnant, and so far out of my league we weren't even playing the same sport. But there was something about her that called to the part of me that couldn't help trying to fix things. She was alone in this pregnancy, clearly worried about more than she was saying and working herself to exhaustion trying to be everything to everyone. It reminded me of myself in those first months after Sarah died, trying to be both parents to Maya, trying to maintain my job, trying to keep the household running, all while drowning in grief and terror. I'd barely made it through, and I'd had misses. Chen and a few friends from Sarah's life, and the random kindness of strangers. Alexandra had a company to run, and apparently no one to share the burden with. The thought bothered me all weekend, even as I threw myself into being present for Maya. We did the playground on Saturday, where she made friends with another girl and they spent 2 hours building an elaborate castle in the sandbox. We hit the library on Sunday, where she loaded up on books about space and dinosaurs, and one about a girl whose mom had died that I wasn't sure I was emotionally ready for her to read. This one looks sad, I'd said carefully when she added it to her stack. Mrs. Chen said reading about people like us helps us feel less alone. Maya looked up at me with eyes far too wise for 8 years old. Is it okay if I read it, or will it make you too sad? And there it was, my daughter trying to protect me even as she navigated her own grief. You can read whatever you want, Sunshine. I'm okay, I promise. That night, after she was asleep, I sat in my small living room with a beer I couldn't quite afford and thought about Alexandra's question. What was I doing this weekend? The answer was everything and nothing, filling hours with small moments that added up to a life. It wasn't fancy or exciting, but it was ours. What did Alexandra do with her weekends? Did she work, read, prepare for Oliver's arrival? Did she have friends, family beyond her mother, anyone to talk to about the fears that came with first-time parenthood? Monday morning arrived with gray skies threatening rain, and I found myself at my desk 15 minutes early, coffee ready, Alexandra's schedule reviewed and color-coded. I'd spent Sunday evening researching the Singapore expansion so I'd be better prepared to support whatever she needed this week. Alexandra arrived at 8:30 exactly, and I had her coffee waiting, decaf with just a splash of milk, the way she'd been taking it all week to avoid caffeine. She accepted it with a grateful smile that made the effort worthwhile. Good weekend? She asked. Great weekend. Maya and I hit the library, and she checked out approximately 7,000 books about dinosaurs and space. How was yours? Something flickered across her face. Fine. Caught up on work, mostly, which meant she'd spent the entire weekend in her home office, probably. The thought made me frown, but before I could say anything, her phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. Staff meeting in 30 minutes, I said. Conference room is already set up, and I printed the agenda items you sent over last night. You're a lifesaver. She headed toward her office, then paused in the doorway. Ethan? I'm glad you're here. This first week has been immeasurably easier with you managing things. The words warmed me all the way through my second cup of terrible break room coffee and 3 hours of back-to-back phone calls and email management. I was learning the rhythm of this job, the ebb and flow of executive life, The careful dance of priorities and politics. It was almost lunchtime when Alexandra emerged from a meeting looking pale and unsteady. She gripped the edge of my desk, breathing carefully through her nose, and I was on my feet immediately. "What's wrong? Should I call your doctor?" "No, just—" She pressed a hand to her stomach. "Just Braxton Hicks contractions. They're normal, just uncomfortable. I need to sit down for a minute." I guided her to the chair by my desk, my hand hovering near her elbow, ready to catch her if she stumbled. "Water? Do you need water?" "Please." I grabbed a bottle from the mini fridge I'd discovered in the break room and handed it over, watching as she sipped slowly. The color was gradually returning to her face, but she still looked shaken. "How often is this happening?" I asked. "A few times a day. It's fine, Ethan. Really, Dr. Morrison said it's completely normal at this stage." "The same Dr. Morrison who sent you that email about additional support?" The words were out before I could think better of them. Alexandra's head snapped up, her eyes meeting mine with something that might have been fear. "You read my email?" "No, I saw the subject line and the preview text when I was sorting your inbox Friday. I didn't read it, I swear, but—" I stopped, took a breath, tried to find the right words. "Look, it's none of my business what your medical situation is, but if there's something I should know to help you better, to make sure you're not overdoing it." She was quiet for a long moment, studying me with that intense gaze that seemed to see straight through all my defenses. Finally, she sighed. "This isn't my first pregnancy," she said quietly. "I had a miscarriage last year, late second trimester, and before that, 2 earlier losses. Doctor Morrison is concerned about my stress levels and wants me to consider reducing my workload or taking early leave." The words hit me like a physical blow. 4 pregnancies, 3 losses. The fear I'd seen in her eyes that day in the rain suddenly made devastating sense. "I'm so sorry," I said, inadequate words for such profound loss. "I didn't tell you to make you feel sorry for me." Her voice was firm, despite the emotion underneath. "I told you because you're right. If you're going to help me manage my schedule, you should know why I sometimes need flexibility, why I might need to leave early for appointments, or why I'm paranoid about every twinge and pain. Does your mother know? The board?" "My mother knows. The board knows I'm pregnant, but not about the previous losses. As far as they're concerned, this is my first pregnancy and everything is perfectly routine." She met my eyes. "And I'd like to keep it that way. Can I trust you with this?" "Of course. Always." I didn't even have to think about the answer. "What do you need from me?" "Just this. Being understanding when I need to slow down. Helping me protect time for appointments and rest without making it obvious that I'm worried. And maybe," she hesitated, "maybe occasionally reminding me that working 16-hour days isn't actually good for Oliver, even when I'm convinced I need to." "I can do that." I pulled out my phone, already making notes. "Starting with moving your 2 o'clock meeting so you can actually have lunch instead of working through it again. You've eaten at your desk every day this week." "Ethan." "Nope. Part of my job, remember? Making sure you maintain work-life balance, which includes eating actual meals." I was already typing up an email to reschedule. "And I'm blocking an hour every afternoon on your calendar for administrative work, which is code for you getting to actually breathe without someone demanding your attention." "You're managing me," she said, but there was amusement in her voice. "I'm assisting you. That's literally my job title." I hit send on the email, feeling oddly satisfied. "Now, what do you actually want for lunch? And don't say a salad from your desk." She laughed, the sound genuine and warm, and for a moment the professional distance between us dissolved into something that felt almost like friendship. "Surprise me," she said. "Something with actual nutritional value that I'll actually want to eat. Think you can handle that, Executive Assistant Cole?" "Watch me, boss." And just like that, our relationship shifted into something new. Still professional, still bounded by the reality of our positions, but underlaid with a trust and understanding that went deeper than typical employee-employer dynamics. I didn't know it yet, but that moment, her trusting me with her fears, me stepping up to protect her, would become the foundation of something neither of us expected. Something that would change both our lives in ways we couldn't yet imagine. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm that felt both natural and revolutionary. Ethan found himself becoming not just Alexandra's assistant, but her advocate, her buffer against a corporate world that demanded everything and gave little in return. He learned to read her moods in the set of her shoulders, to know when she needed him to be assertive on her behalf and when she needed space to handle things herself. It was a Tuesday in late May when everything shifted again. Ethan was at his desk reviewing the schedule for Alexandra's upcoming trip to the Seattle office when his phone rang with an internal extension he didn't recognize. He answered professionally, already pulling up his notepad. Ethan Cole. Mr. Cole, this is Barbara Hendricks from Legal. The woman's voice was crisp, businesslike. I need to speak with Ms. Cross immediately. It's regarding the Henderson acquisition. Ethan glanced at his screen. Alexandra was in a video conference with the Tokyo office, something that had been scheduled for weeks and couldn't be interrupted. Ms. Cross is in a meeting until 11:30. Can I take a message or schedule a call back? This can't wait. We've just received notification that Henderson is threatening to pull out of the deal unless we agree to their revised terms by end of business today. Ms. Cross needs to know now. The urgency in her voice made Ethan's decision easy. Hold on. He muted the call, got up, and knocked softly on Alexandra's office door before opening it slightly. She was on camera, mid-sentence, but her eyes flicked to him with a question. He held up his phone and mouthed, "Legal, urgent, Henderson." Understanding flashed across her face. She nodded once, then turned back to her camera. "Gentlemen, I apologize, but I have an urgent situation that requires immediate attention. Can we resume this call in 1 hour?" She waited for acknowledgement, then ended the conference and looked at Ethan expectantly. He put the call on speaker. "Ms. Hendricks, you're on with Ms. Cross." What followed was 15 minutes of intense negotiation strategy, with Alexandra firing questions and Barbara providing answers in rapid succession. Ethan took notes without being asked, already anticipating that Alexandra would need a written summary of this conversation. When the call ended, Alexandra sat back in her chair and pressed both hands to her temples. "The Henderson deal is worth $40 million, she said quietly. "If it falls through because they're getting cold feet, that's going to make the board very unhappy, especially Richard's uncle, who pushed hard for this acquisition. What do you need from me?" She looked up, and he saw the exhaustion there, the weight of responsibility that never seemed to lift. "Call Barbara back and tell her I'll review the revised terms within the hour. Then block out my afternoon, cancel anything that isn't absolutely critical. I need to run numbers and consult with the finance team before I can make a decision on this." "Consider it done." Ethan paused at the door. "Have you eaten anything today?" "Ethan, that's what I thought. I'm ordering lunch. You're going to eat it while you work, and I don't want to hear any arguments about not having time." He softened his tone. "You can't make good decisions if your blood sugar is in the basement, and Oliver needs actual nutrition, not just stress hormones." Her expression shifted from exasperation to something warmer. "You're getting very comfortable bossing around the CEO." "Someone has to. You're terrible at taking care of yourself." He grinned to take the sting out of the words. "Besides, you hired me to make your life easier. Let me do my job." "Fine, but nothing heavy. My stomach's been off all morning." He ordered soup and bread from the place she liked, then spent the next hour systematically clearing her afternoon schedule. Most people were understanding when he explained there was an urgent situation requiring the CEO's attention. Richard Thornton was not. "This is the third time this month she's canceled on me." Richard's voice dripped with condescension through the phone. "Perhaps you should remind Ms. Cross that some of us have priorities that matter to the company's bottom line." Ethan felt his jaw tighten. "Mr. Thornton, Ms. Cross is currently managing a $40 million acquisition that's threatening to collapse. I'm sure she'd be happy to discuss your department's supply chain optimization proposal once that's resolved. How does Thursday at 2 sound?" "Thursday? That's 3 days away. Or the following Monday. Those are the options currently available." Ethan kept his voice professionally pleasant while internally enjoying Richard's frustrated sputter. "This is unacceptable. I'm going to speak to Alexandra directly about your attitude." "You're welcome to do that, sir. In the meantime, should I pencil you in for Thursday or Monday?" There was a long pause. "Thursday, 2 o'clock. And tell Alexandra I expect more than 20 minutes this time." Ethan made the notation, ended the call, and allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction. Diane had been right. Standing up to Richard felt good. The afternoon passed in organized chaos. Alexandra worked through lunch while Ethan fielded calls and coordinated with various departments. By 4 o'clock, she'd made her decision. Agree to most of Henderson's terms, but hold firm on 3 key points that legal had identified as non-negotiable. The revised proposal went out at 4:30, and then there was nothing to do but wait. At 5:45, Barbara Hendricks called back. Henderson had accepted the counter-proposal. The deal was back on. Ethan heard Alexandra's exhale of relief from his desk, followed by the sound of her chair rolling back. She appeared in her doorway looking rumpled and exhausted but triumphant. "We did it. The acquisition is secured." "You did it," Ethan corrected. "I just answered phones and moved meetings around." "You protected my time so I could focus on what mattered. That's not just answering phones, Ethan. That's exactly what I needed." She glanced at her watch and winced. "It's almost 6. You should have left an hour ago. Maya's probably wondering where you are." "She knows I have a demanding boss." He shut down his computer, gathering his things. "Besides, Mrs. Chen doesn't mind the extra time. I texted her earlier to give her a heads up." Alexandra leaned against the doorframe, one hand resting on her stomach in that protective gesture that had become second nature to her. "Does Maya ever resent the job? The hours you work, the energy it takes from you?" The question surprised him with its vulnerability. "She's 8. I'm sure someday when she's a teenager, she'll resent everything I do." He smiled to soften the words. "But right now, she's just happy that we can afford pizza on Thursdays again, and that I don't come home looking like the weight of the world is crushing me." "And do you? Still feel like that?" Ethan considered the question seriously. A month ago, he'd been drowning, certain he couldn't keep his head above water much longer. Now he was tired, challenged, sometimes overwhelmed, but no longer drowning. "No, this job is hard, but it's good hard. It matters, and I'm good at it." "You are." Alexandra pushed off from the doorframe, wincing slightly at the movement. "Very good at it. I don't know what I did before you got here, honestly." "Worked yourself into exhaustion and stressed yourself into false labor, apparently." The words came out more sharply than he'd intended, prompted by concern and the lingering memory of that rainy morning. She didn't take offense. Instead, she smiled ruefully. "Touché. I suppose I deserve that." She grabbed her bag from her office, movement slower than usual. "Come on. If I'm making you work late, the least I can do is share a car service home. Where do you live?" "Logan Square." "But you don't have to." "Logan Square is on the way to my place. Let me do this, Ethan. Please." There was something in her voice that made him agree, some note of loneliness that reminded him she'd spent the entire day under crushing pressure with no one to share the victory with except an employee she'd known for less than a month. The car service pulled up within minutes, a sleek black sedan that made Ethan hyper-aware of his department store suit and scuffed shoes. But Alexandra didn't seem to notice or care, settling into the back seat with a soft groan of relief. 32 weeks, she said, catching his questioning look. "Everything hurts all the time, and I'm only going to get bigger. It's glamorous, let me tell you." Sarah used to say pregnancy was nature's way of making you so uncomfortable that labor seems like a relief by comparison. The memory came with less pain than it used to, softened by time and distance. "Your wife sounds like she was a wise woman." "She was. Funny, too. She could find humor in anything, even dying." Ethan stared out the window at the Chicago streets sliding past in the evening light. "Toward the end, when she knew she wasn't going to make it, she made me promise to find someone else eventually. Said she refused to have me moping around being noble and alone for the rest of my life." "Have you? Found someone else?" "No. Between work and Maya and just trying to survive, there hasn't been time, or energy, or honestly, inclination." He turned back to find Alexandra watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "What about Oliver's father? I know you said you're doing this alone, but I've been curious about the story there. You don't have to tell me if it's too personal." She was quiet for so long he thought she wasn't going to answer. Then she sighed, her hand moving to her stomach again. "There is no father, not in the traditional sense. I used IVF with a sperm donor from a clinic." She said it matter-of-factly, but Ethan could hear the defensiveness underneath. "I'm 36 years old. I've spent the last decade building my career, and every relationship I've had has either been with men who were intimidated by my success or men who wanted to use my position for their own advancement. After the third miscarriage, I realized I was running out of time to have the family I wanted, so I decided to do it myself. That's incredibly brave. She looked at him sharply, as if expecting judgment or pity. Finding neither, her expression softened. Or incredibly foolish? Most days I go back and forth. Why would it be foolish to go after what you want? To refuse to let circumstance or other people's limitations determine your future? Ethan shook his head. That sounds like the same determination that made you CEO of a Fortune 500 company. I don't see why it would be different for family. Because running a company and raising a child are entirely different things. One has metrics and benchmarks and quarterly reviews. The other is just stumbling through and hoping you don't completely screw up a tiny human who didn't ask to be born into your complicated life. Her voice cracked slightly on the last words. The car pulled up in front of Ethan's building, but he made no move to get out. Can I tell you something my mother-in-law said to me right after Sarah died? I was falling apart, convinced I couldn't possibly be both parents to Maya, certain I was going to fail her in every way that mattered. What did she say? She said that love and showing up are 90% of parenting. The rest is just details you figure out as you go. He met Alexandra's eyes directly. You love Oliver already. I can see it every time you touch your stomach, every time you rearrange your schedule for a doctor's appointment, every time you force yourself to eat when you're not hungry because he needs nutrition. And you're already showing up for him in every way that counts. The rest? You'll figure it out, just like every other parent in history. Tears welled in Alexandra's eyes, and she blinked rapidly, clearly trying to maintain her composure. Thank you. I needed to hear that today of all days. Anytime. That's what friends are for. The word hung between them. Friends. It was presumptuous of him to claim friendship with his boss, with someone so far above his social and economic status. But it also felt true in a way that transcended their professional relationship. Alexandra's smile was tremulous but genuine. Friends. Yes, I'd like that, Ethan. He got out of the car feeling like something significant had shifted between them, though he couldn't quite name what. As the sedan pulled away, he stood on the sidewalk for a moment, watching it disappear into evening traffic and wondering what exactly he'd gotten himself into. The next morning brought a surprise. Ethan arrived at his desk to find a gift bag sitting on his chair with a card attached. Inside was a high-end leather portfolio with his initials embossed on the front, along with a set of expensive pens. The card read, "Thank you for protecting my time yesterday and for the conversation on the way home. You're more than an assistant. You're an answer to a prayer I didn't know I'd prayed. Ethan ran his fingers over the soft leather, touched by the gesture in a way that felt disproportionate to the actual gift. It wasn't the expense, though this portfolio probably cost more than his weekly grocery budget. It was the thoughtfulness, the acknowledgement that he mattered, that his contribution was seen and valued. She's good at that. Diane appeared at his elbow, startling him. Seeing people and making them feel appreciated. It's one of her strengths as a leader. It's a nice gesture, Ethan said carefully, not wanting to make too much of it. It's more than nice. Alexandra doesn't give gifts lightly. She must really value you. Diane's expression was knowing. Fair warning. Once she decides someone is part of her inner circle, she's fiercely protective, but she also expects loyalty in return. That seems fair. Just be careful, Ethan. She's your boss first, and she's going through a vulnerable time. Lines can get blurry, especially when you're both working long hours in close proximity. Diane's voice was gentle but firm. I like you. I think you're good for her. But remember who signs your paychecks. The warning sat uncomfortably in Ethan's mind all morning, especially when Alexandra emerged from her office with coffee in hand and a genuine smile on her face. You found the gift. Do you like it? It's too much, Alexandra. I was just doing my job. You were being a friend when I needed one. That's worth acknowledging. She leaned against his desk, casual and relaxed in a way he rarely saw during business hours. How's Maya? Did you get home okay last night? Late, but fine. She was already asleep, but Mrs. Chen said she'd had a good day. He pulled up his calendar, trying to redirect the conversation to safer, more professional territory. You have the finance committee meeting in 20 minutes, then lunch with the mayor's office, then... Ethan. Her voice was soft. You're allowed to have personal conversations with me. Actually, I'd prefer them. Spending 10 hours a day with someone who only talks to me about meetings and schedules sounds exhausting. I just don't want to presume you're not presuming. I'm explicitly inviting you to treat me like a human being instead of just a job title. She smiled at his discomfort. Tell me something about Maya. What's she into right now? Besides dinosaurs and space. So he did. He told her about Maya's current obsession with learning to cook, which mostly involved making elaborate messes in their tiny kitchen, about her determination to befriend a stray cat in their neighborhood, despite Ethan's concerns about fleas and veterinary bills they couldn't afford, about her recent decision that she wanted to be a doctor when she grew up so she could fix people like the doctors tried to fix Mommy. Alexandra listened with genuine interest, asking questions and laughing in all the right places. It should have felt strange discussing his daughter with the CEO of a major corporation. Instead, it felt natural, easy, like they'd been friends for years instead of weeks. She sounds amazing, Alexandra said when he finished. I'd love to meet her sometime, if that wouldn't be weird. Why would it be weird? I don't know. Mixing personal and professional lives. Some people have strong boundaries about that. She looked uncertain, vulnerable in a way that reminded Ethan she was still figuring out this friendship thing too. You're welcome to meet her anytime. Fair warning though, she'll probably ask you approximately 7 million questions about being pregnant and whether you can feel the baby kick and what it's like to run a company. 8-year-olds have no filter. I look forward to it. The warmth in Alexandra's voice made Ethan's chest tighten with an emotion he refused to examine too closely. The rest of the week passed in a blur of meetings and deadlines, and an increasing sense that he and Alexandra were building something beyond a typical working relationship. She started staying later at the office, often emerging from conference calls to find him still at his desk, even though he could have left hours ago. They'd end up talking, about work initially, but increasingly about life, families, dreams deferred, and hopes for the future. Friday afternoon found them both exhausted from a particularly grueling week. Alexandra had back-to-back meetings until 3, and Ethan could see the strain in the tight set of her jaw, the way she moved more carefully than usual. When her last meeting ended, she didn't return to her office. Instead, she sank into the chair across from his desk with a heavy sigh. I have a proposition for you, she said without preamble. Ethan looked up from the expense reports he'd been reviewing. I'm listening. I'm supposed to go to a charity gala tomorrow night. It's one of those events I can't skip. Major donors, board members, all the people who matter to Valamont's public image. She made a face. I hate these things in general, and the thought of spending 3 hours making small talk while my feet swell and strangers touch my stomach without permission sounds like torture. Sounds awful, Ethan agreed. Come with me, as my +1. She said it quickly, like she was worried she'd lose her nerve. I know it's a Saturday and you have Maya, but I'll pay for a babysitter, and you'd be doing me a huge favor. These events are so much more bearable when you have someone to talk to who doesn't just see you as a networking opportunity. Ethan's first instinct was to refuse. He didn't belong in that world of champagne and designer gowns and people who spent more on a watch than he used to make in 6 months. But looking at Alexandra's face, seeing the genuine hope there mixed with exhaustion and what looked like loneliness, he found himself nodding. Okay, but I have to warn you, I don't own a tuxedo. That's fine. I'll have one sent to your apartment, size 42 long, right? At his surprised look, she smiled. I notice things. It's part of being a good CEO. You're really going to send me a tuxedo? Consider it a work expense. You're technically attending in a professional capacity as my executive assistant. But her eyes were warm, making it clear they both knew this was personal, not professional. The tuxedo arrived Saturday afternoon in a garment bag from a store Ethan had only ever walked past, never dared enter. It fit perfectly, making him look like someone who belonged in Alexandra's world, even though he felt like an imposter. Maya was beside herself with excitement, insisting on taking approximately 40 pictures of him before Mrs. Chen arrived to babysit. You look like a prince, Daddy. She adjusted his bow tie with serious concentration. Is Ms. Alexandra going to be your date? It's not a date, sunshine. It's work. Maya gave him a look that was far too knowing for an 8-year-old. Mommy used to say that sometimes the best things start out pretending to be work. Before Ethan could figure out how to respond to that, the car service arrived. He kissed Maya goodbye, promised not to stay out too late, and found himself being driven to Alexandra's address in Lincoln Park. The building was exactly what he expected: elegant, secure, expensive. The doorman called up to announce him, then directed him to the elevator with the kind of polite deference that made it clear Ethan was expected. Alexandra answered her door in a blue dress that somehow managed to be both elegant and accommodating of her pregnancy. Her hair was down for the first time since he'd known her, falling in dark waves around her shoulders. She looked beautiful and nervous and nothing like the confident CEO he worked for every day. "Too much?" She gestured at the dress self-consciously. "I feel like I'm trying too hard." "You look perfect," Ethan said honestly. "Really beautiful." Something flickered in her eyes, pleasure, surprise, maybe something deeper. "You clean up pretty well yourself. That tux fits you better than I expected." "That sounds like you're surprised I'm not a complete disaster in formal wear." "More like I'm pleasantly surprised to discover you have shoulders under those work shirts." Her eyes widened as soon as the words left her mouth. "That came out wrong. I meant, it's fine." Ethan laughed, charmed by her flustered reaction. "Should we go before one of us says something even more awkward?" The gala was being held at the Art Institute, and even Ethan had to admit it was impressive. The modern wing had been transformed into an elegant party space, all dramatic lighting and strategic flower arrangements and servers circulating with champagne and canapes. Alexandra grabbed sparkling water instead of champagne, and Ethan stuck to the same out of solidarity. "Alexandra!" A woman in her 60s materialized out of the crowd, her smile sharp and assessing. "How wonderful to see you. And who is this handsome young man?" "Patricia, good to see you." Alexandra's voice had taken on the professional polish Ethan recognized from board meetings. "This is Ethan Cole, my executive assistant. Ethan, Patricia Warfield, she's on the board of the Art Institute." Patricia's eyes sharpened with interest. "Executive assistant? How modern. I remember when they were called secretaries." She laughed at her own joke that wasn't really a joke. "And how are you feeling, dear? You must be what, 7 months along now?" "Almost 8. Alexandra's hand moved to her stomach, defensive. "Everything's going well." "That's wonderful. Such a brave choice, doing this on your own." Patricia's tone suggested she thought it was anything but brave. "I do hope you're planning to take proper maternity leave. The company needs you, but surely family comes first." It was a trap dressed up as concern, implying that Alexandra couldn't possibly be both a good CEO and a good mother. Ethan watched Alexandra's jaw tighten, saw her preparing a diplomatically worded response, and felt anger flare hot in his chest. "Actually," he interjected smoothly, "Alexandra has put together an excellent succession plan for her leave that ensures continuity of leadership while she bonds with her son. She's brilliant at planning for contingencies. It's one of the things that makes her such an effective CEO." Patricia blinked, clearly not used to being interrupted by someone she'd mentally classified as the help. "I see. Well, that's good to hear." She turned to Alexandra with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "He's very protective of you. How sweet." After Patricia excused herself, Alexandra turned to Ethan with an expression that mixed amusement and gratitude. "You just defended me to one of the most influential women on the board." She was being condescending and implying you couldn't handle both the job and motherhood. Someone needed to shut that down. "My hero." She said it lightly, but her eyes held genuine warmth. "Come on, let's get some food before someone else corners us with backhanded compliments." They spent the next hour navigating the social minefield of the gala together. Ethan quickly learned the rhythm, let Alexandra lead in conversations, but stay close enough to provide support when needed. He rescued her from a monotonous conversation with a museum donor who wanted to talk about his golf game. She returned the favor by smoothly extracting them from a group where Richard Thornton was holding court and looking their way with obvious displeasure. "He's going to make Monday interesting," Alexandra murmured as they escaped to a quieter corner. "Richard doesn't like being ignored at these things. Richard doesn't like anyone who won't kiss his feet and tell him he's brilliant." Ethan handed her a plate of the appetizers he'd collected. "Eat something. You've been nursing that water for an hour." "Yes, Mother?" But she took the plate, nibbling on a small sandwich. "This is much better than I thought it would be. Having you here, I mean.
Usually these events feel like 3 hours of performance art where I play the role of confident, successful woman while internally screaming. And tonight? Tonight I get to be a person instead of a persona. It's a nice change. She looked out at the party, her expression thoughtful. Do you ever feel like you're constantly performing, pretending to be what everyone expects instead of who you actually are? Every day for the last 3 years, Ethan admitted. The competent single dad who has everything under control, the reliable employee who never complains, the guy who's totally fine and definitely not one crisis away from falling apart. He paused. Except lately, I've been feeling less like I'm performing and more like I'm actually becoming that person. Because of the job? Because someone gave me a chance when I desperately needed one. Because for the first time since Sarah died, I'm not just surviving, I'm actually living. He met her eyes. So thank you for that, for seeing something in me worth investing in. Alexandra was quiet for a long moment, emotions flickering across her face too quickly to identify. You're going to make me cry, she said finally, and I'm wearing makeup that cost more than it should to have it ruined by tears. We can't have that. Ethan offered his arm in an exaggerated courtly gesture. Shall we dance? That seems like the appropriate thing to do at these fancy events. I haven't danced in years, and I'm very pregnant. So we'll go slow. Come on, trust me. She slipped her hand into the crook of his elbow, and he led her to the dance floor where other couples swayed to string quartet music. He kept his hand respectfully on her waist, mindful of her condition, and they moved together in a gentle circle. See? Not so bad, Ethan said. Actually, it's really nice. Alexandra's voice was soft, intimate in a way that made his breath catch. Thank you for coming tonight, Ethan, for being here, for all of it. There's nowhere else I'd rather be. The words hung between them, weighted with meaning neither of them was quite ready to acknowledge. They danced in silence, the world narrowing down to just the two of them swaying together while music played and conversation buzzed around them like distant static. In that moment, Ethan realized with startling clarity that somewhere along the way this had stopped being just about gratitude or professional respect. He cared about Alexandra deeply, genuinely cared in a way that felt dangerous and inevitable all at once. And judging by the way she looked at him, her eyes soft and vulnerable and hopeful, she felt it too. The question was what they were going to do about it. But that was a problem for another day. Tonight, they danced. The Monday after the gala arrived with an unexpected tension crackling through the air of the executive floor. Ethan felt it the moment he stepped off the elevator, the sidelong glances from other assistants, the way conversation seemed to pause when he walked past, the weight of speculation and gossip that clung to him like humidity before a storm. Diane caught him at the coffee station, her expression carefully neutral. So, you and Alexandra at the gala, people are talking. We attended a work function together. That's what assistants do. Ethan kept his voice level, professional, even as his stomach churned with unease. You danced with her. Multiple people saw you, and according to Patricia Warfield, who apparently tells everyone everything, you were quite cozy together all evening. Diane's tone wasn't accusatory, just matter of fact. I'm not judging, Ethan, but you need to be aware that people are going to make assumptions. Let them. We didn't do anything wrong. I know that, you know that, but corporate politics don't care about truth. They care about perception. She touched his arm gently. Just be careful. Alexandra has enemies here, people who would love to find something to use against her. And you're visible now in a way you weren't before. The warning sat like lead in Ethan's stomach as he made his way to his desk. Alexandra's office door was already open, and he could hear her on a phone call, her voice clipped and professional. He busied himself with reviewing her schedule, trying to ignore the paranoid feeling that everyone was watching him. When Alexandra finally emerged from her office at 9:30, she looked exhausted despite it being early morning. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and she moved with the careful deliberation of someone in pain. Rough night? Ethan asked, keeping his voice low. Oliver decided to practice his kickboxing skills on my ribcage from midnight until 4. She accepted the coffee he handed her with a grateful smile. Thank you. You're a lifesaver. Have you eaten anything? Not yet. I'll grab something. No, you won't. You'll get caught up in meetings and forget until you're dizzy and nauseous. Ethan was already pulling up the delivery app on his phone. I'm ordering you actual breakfast. The protein-heavy kind that will keep you going until lunch. When did you become so bossy? The day you hired me to manage your life. He placed the order, then looked up to find her watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. What? Nothing. Just thinking about how much things have changed in 2 months. She leaned against his desk, one hand pressed to her lower back. Patricia Warfield called me yesterday. Apparently we're the talk of the charity circuit. Ethan's jaw tightened. What did she say? Nothing explicit. Just a lot of pointed comments about how devoted you seem, how unusual it is for an executive assistant to be so personally involved in their boss's life. Alexandra's tone was light, but he could hear the concern underneath. She suggested I might want to be careful about appearances. Do you want me to maintain more distance? Be less... He struggled for the right word. Less whatever it is I'm being? God, no. The vehemence in her voice surprised them both. Ethan, you're the only person in my life right now who treats me like a human being instead of a chess piece or a business opportunity. I'm not giving that up because Patricia Warfield has too much time on her hands and not enough actual problems. But if it's causing issues for you, let me worry about that. You just keep doing what you're doing. She straightened with a wince. Speaking of which, what's on the agenda today? They fell into their morning routine, reviewing meetings, prioritizing emails, discussing strategy for the day ahead. But something had shifted since Saturday night, some invisible line that had been crossed without either of them explicitly acknowledging it. They stood closer than necessary when reviewing documents. Their conversations lingered beyond what was strictly professional, and when their hands accidentally brushed reaching for the same file, neither of them pulled away immediately. The breakfast Ethan ordered arrived, and he brought it into her office, setting it on her desk with deliberate care. Eat, all of it. I'm going to check. You really are becoming insufferable. But she was smiling as she said it, already unwrapping the breakfast sandwich. Someone has to look after you. You're terrible at it yourself. Ethan turned to leave, then paused at the door. Alexandra? Saturday night, dancing with you? That wasn't just professional courtesy on my part. I want you to know that. He left before she could respond, his heart hammering against his ribs. It was reckless to acknowledge the growing feelings between them, stupid to risk the best job he'd ever had, and the friendship he'd come to depend on. But watching her work herself to exhaustion, seeing her navigate the loneliness of impending single motherhood, had made it impossible to maintain the professional distance everyone seemed to think was so important. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of meetings and phone calls. Richard Thornton stopped by at 10:30, ostensibly to discuss quarterly projections, but really to make pointed comments about the gala. I saw you there with Alexandra, Richard said, his tone dripping false friendliness. Didn't realize executive assistants were invited to those events these days. Ms. Cross needed a +1. I was available. Ethan kept his voice professionally neutral, refusing to take the bait. How convenient. Tell me, does she always blur professional boundaries like that? Or are you special? Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. If you have concerns about Ms. Cross's professional conduct, I'm sure HR would be happy to discuss them with you. Ethan stood, using his height to subtle advantage. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have actual work to do. Richard's expression darkened. Careful, Cole. You might be Alexandra's pet project right now, but that doesn't make you untouchable. Remember your place. After Richard left, Ethan had to take several deep breaths to calm the fury burning in his chest. The casual dismissal, the implication that he was somehow taking advantage of Alexandra, or vice versa, it made him want to put his fist through something. That looked intense. Diane appeared with 2 cups of coffee, handing him one. Let me guess, Richard being his charming self? He basically called me Alexandra's pet and suggested I was overstepping. Ethan accepted the coffee gratefully. Is he always like this, or did I do something specific to piss him off? Both, probably. Richard's used to being the most important person in any room, and Alexandra doesn't treat him that way. It drives him crazy. And now she has you, someone she clearly trusts and values, which makes him even more irrelevant. Diane sipped her own coffee. He's going to make trouble if he can. Watch your back. The warning proved prophetic. By Wednesday, Ethan started noticing small things going wrong. Messages not getting passed along, Meeting rooms mysteriously double-booked. His access to certain files suddenly revoked without explanation. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to create friction and make him look incompetent. When he mentioned it to Alexandra during their end-of-day debrief, her expression turned thunderous. "Richard, it has to be." She pulled up her computer, fingers flying over the keyboard. He's done this before with people he perceives as threats. Small acts of sabotage designed to undermine confidence and create problems. Why would he see me as a threat? I'm just an assistant. You're not just anything, Ethan. You have influence with me, access to information, and you're not afraid to stand up to him. That makes you dangerous in his limited worldview. She made several rapid clicks, her jaw set in determined lines. I'm putting a stop to this. Now. Alexandra, please don't make this a bigger issue than it needs to be. I can handle— No. Her voice was firm, brooking no argument. I won't let him sabotage someone on my team because of his ego. This ends today. She picked up her phone and dialed Richard's extension, putting it on speaker. He answered on the second ring, his voice oozing false pleasantness. Alexandra, to what do I owe the pleasure? Cut the act, Richard. I know you've been interfering with Ethan's work access and creating problems for him. It stops now. There was a pause, then a laugh. I have no idea what you're talking about. Perhaps your assistant is simply having trouble adjusting to the demands of his position. Or perhaps you're threatened by someone who's more competent and professional than you've ever been. Alexandra's voice was ice. Here's how this is going to work. You're going to immediately restore all of Ethan's access. You're going to stop the petty sabotage. And you're going to treat him with the same respect you'd show any other member of my executive team. Are we clear? You're awfully protective of him. Makes a person wonder why. What it should make you wonder is why you're so determined to create problems instead of doing your actual job. I've been reviewing your department's performance metrics, Richard, and they're concerning. Perhaps we should schedule a meeting to discuss your own competency before you worry about anyone else's. The threat was clear and unmistakable. Richard's voice when he spoke again was tight with barely controlled anger. That won't be necessary. I'll take care of the access issues. See that you do. And Richard, stay away from my assistant. This is your only warning. She ended the call and sat back, pressing both hands to her stomach. Ethan could see her breathing carefully, deliberately, working to calm herself down. You didn't have to do that, he said quietly. I could have handled Richard myself. I know you could have. But you shouldn't have to. And I won't let him bully you because he's upset that I value your opinion more than his. She looked up, her eyes fierce. You're part of my team, Ethan. That means something to me. It means I protect you. The intensity in her voice made something warm and dangerous unfurl in his chest. Thank you for standing up for me. Always. She held his gaze for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. Then she seemed to catch herself, glancing at the clock. It's almost 7. You should go home to Maya. I have a few more things to finish up here. Not a chance. If you're staying, I'm staying. Ethan settled back in his chair, making it clear he wasn't budging. Besides, Maya's at a sleepover tonight. I've got nowhere to be. Alexandra smiled, soft and genuine. Then I guess you're stuck with me for dinner. There's a Thai place that delivers. They know my order by heart at this point. They ordered dinner and ate in her office, the city lights glittering below them as night settled over Chicago. The conversation flowed easily, moving from work to personal topics and back again. Alexandra told him about growing up as the daughter of self-made millionaires, the pressure to excel, the loneliness of being constantly compared to impossible standards. Ethan talked about his mother's stroke and dropping out of school, about meeting Sarah and thinking he'd found his forever only to have it ripped away far too soon. Do you think you'll ever want to get married again? Alexandra asked, pushing her food around with her chopsticks. Honestly, I don't know. The thought of loving someone that much and potentially losing them again terrifies me. Ethan set down his own chopsticks, considering the question seriously. But I also don't want to live the rest of my life alone. And Maya deserves to see what healthy love looks like. To know that loss doesn't mean you stop trying. That's very wise. What about you? Would you ever want a partner in this? Someone to share parenting with? Alexandra was quiet for a long moment, her hand moving to her stomach in that protective gesture he'd come to recognize.
I thought I was okay doing this alone. Convinced myself I didn't need anyone else, that wanting partnership was weakness. She looked up, and in her eyes he saw vulnerability and hope and fear all tangled together. But lately I've been wondering if maybe I was wrong. If maybe wanting help doesn't make you weak, it just makes you human. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Ethan knew he should say something professional, should maintain the boundaries that were already dangerously blurred. Instead, he heard himself say, "You deserve someone who sees how incredible you are. Someone who wants to be there for you and Oliver, not because they have to, but because they can't imagine being anywhere else." "Do I?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Yes. Absolutely yes." They stared at each other across her desk, the air thick with everything they weren't saying. Then Alexandra's phone buzzed with an urgent email, breaking the moment, and they both retreated into the safety of work discussions. But something had been acknowledged, some truth neither of them could take back. And when Ethan finally left at 9:30, he carried it home with him like a secret too fragile to examine in the light. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange limbo. They continued working together seamlessly, their professional partnership stronger than ever. But underneath ran a current of awareness, of possibility, that neither of them seemed ready to address directly. They found excuses to stay late together. Their casual touches lingered longer than necessary. And sometimes Ethan would look up to find Alexandra watching him with an expression that made his heart race. It was Maya who finally forced the issue, in the way only 8-year-olds can. She'd been asking to meet Alexandra for weeks, and Ethan had been putting it off with vague promises of soon and when schedules align. But on a Friday afternoon in mid-June, Alexandra mentioned she had no plans for the weekend, and before Ethan could think better of it, he heard himself inviting her to lunch with him and Maya on Saturday. "Are you sure?" Alexandra asked, surprise and pleasure mixing in her voice. "I don't want to intrude on your time with your daughter." "You're not intruding. Maya's been begging to meet you. Fair warning, though, she will ask you approximately 7,000 questions and have no shame about any of them." Alexandra laughed. "I can handle an inquisitive 8-year-old. What time and where?" They decided on a casual lunch at a family-friendly restaurant in Lincoln Park, neutral territory that wouldn't feel too formal. Ethan spent Friday evening trying to explain to Maya that she needed to be on her best behavior. "I'm always on my best behavior," Maya protested, completely sincere despite abundant evidence to the contrary. "Just remember, Miss Alexandra is my boss. So we need to be respectful and not ask really personal questions, like why she's having a baby by herself." Maya's eyes were wide and innocent. "Especially like that." Saturday arrived sunny and warm, one of those perfect Chicago summer days that made everyone forget the brutal winter. Ethan and Maya arrived at the restaurant first, and he spent the waiting time trying to calm his irrational nervousness. This was just lunch with his boss and his daughter. Nothing weird or significant about it. Then Alexandra walked in, and Ethan's breath caught in his throat. She wore a simple sundress that accommodated her now obvious pregnancy, her hair loose around her shoulders, sunglasses pushed up on her head. She looked younger than she did in the office, more relaxed, more like the woman he had danced with at the gala than the CEO who commanded boardrooms. Maya bounced up from her seat the moment she spotted them. "Ms. Alexandra, you're here! And your belly is so big! Can I feel the baby kick? Daddy said I had to ask permission first before touching anyone's belly, because that's good manners." Alexandra laughed, delighted rather than offended. "Good manners are very important, and yes, you may feel if he starts kicking, though he's been pretty quiet this morning." They settled into the booth. Maya wedged herself right next to Alexandra instead of sitting with Ethan, much to his embarrassment, and ordered lunch. Maya immediately launched into her promised interrogation. "So why are you having a baby all by yourself? Did your husband die like my mommy? Or did you just not want one?" "Maya," Ethan started, mortified, but Alexandra just smiled gently. "It's okay, Ethan. Those are fair questions." She turned to Maya, giving her the full attention she'd give any adult. "I'm having Oliver by myself because I haven't found the right person to be a partner yet. But I really wanted to be a mom, so I decided not to wait anymore." "That's brave," Maya said seriously. Mrs. Chen says it takes a village to raise a child. Do you have a village? I'm working on building one. Your dad is actually a really important part of it. He helps me remember to take care of myself and not work too much. Oh, good. Daddy's really good at taking care of people. He took care of Mommy when she was sick, and now he takes care of me, so he probably has extra caring left over for you and Oliver. The simple, childlike logic made both adults fall silent. Ethan felt heat creeping up his neck, but when he glanced at Alexandra, she was looking at Maya with an expression of such tenderness it made his chest ache. You're very wise for 8 years old, Alexandra said softly. That's what Mrs. Chen says too. She says I have an old soul because of what happened with Mommy. Maya tilted her head, studying Alexandra with frank curiosity. Are you scared about having a baby? Terrified, Alexandra admitted. I want to be a good mom, but I don't know if I'll be able to do it right. Daddy says being a good parent is just loving your kid and showing up even when you're tired or sad or don't know what you're doing. He says Mommy told him that before she died. Maya reached out and patted Alexandra's hand with solemn reassurance. I think you'll be a good mom. You have kind eyes. Ethan watched his daughter, this small, fierce, heartbreakingly perceptive child, offer comfort to a woman she'd just met, and felt something shift in his chest. This was what family looked like. Not perfect or traditional, but real and messy and full of unexpected connections. The rest of lunch passed in easy conversation. Maya asked about running a company and whether Alexandra got to boss people around all day. Alexandra asked about Maya's favorite subjects in school and what she wanted to be when she grew up. And through it all, Ethan watched them connect, watched Maya work her particular magic of making everyone feel seen and valued. They were finishing dessert, ice cream sundaes that Maya insisted everyone needed, when Oliver apparently decided to make his presence known. Alexandra gasped softly, her hand flying to her stomach. What's wrong? Ethan was half out of his seat before she could answer. Nothing wrong. He's just kicking. Hard. She smiled, pressing her hand to the side of her belly. He's very active today. Can I feel, please? Maya was vibrating with excitement. Alexandra took Maya's small hand and placed it on her stomach, and Ethan watched his daughter's face transform with wonder when she felt the movement beneath her palm. He's really in there. A whole person. Maya's eyes were huge. That's so cool. Does it hurt? Sometimes, but mostly it's just amazing. Alexandra's voice was soft, her gaze distant. It reminds me he's real, that I'm not doing this alone. You're not alone, Maya said with absolute certainty. You have Oliver, and you have Daddy, and now you have me too. We're your village. Alexandra's eyes filled with tears, and she blinked rapidly, trying to maintain composure. Thank you, Maya. That means more than you know. After lunch, they walked along the lakefront together, Maya running ahead to chase pigeons while Ethan and Alexandra followed at a slower pace. The summer sun beat down warm on their shoulders, and the lake sparkled like scattered diamonds. Your daughter is extraordinary, Alexandra said. Truly extraordinary. You should be very proud. I am, every single day. Ethan watched Maya leap over cracks in the sidewalk with exaggerated care. She's the best parts of Sarah and somehow none of the worst parts of me. I see a lot of you in her, the kindness, the emotional intelligence, the way she makes people feel valued. Alexandra glanced at him sidelong. She learned that somewhere. Sarah was the one who was good at that stuff. I'm just trying not to screw up her legacy. You're doing more than that, Ethan. You're raising an amazing human being. She stopped walking, turning to face him directly. The sun backlit her hair, turning it to gold at the edges, and Ethan had to resist the urge to reach out and tuck a loose strand behind her ear. Can I tell you something? Anything. These past 2 months working with you, getting to know you, it's been the best part of my pregnancy. Better than the ultrasounds or feeling him kick or any of the milestones I thought would define this experience. Her voice trembled slightly. You make me feel less alone. You and Maya both. And I know that's probably inappropriate to say to your boss, but I can't keep pretending we're just colleagues when I... She stopped abruptly, seeming to catch herself. But Ethan's heart was hammering so hard he could hear it in his ears. When you what? He asked quietly. When I care about you. More than I should. More than is wise.
She looked away, out at the lake, her profile etched against the blue sky. I know all the reasons this is a terrible idea. The power dynamics, the professional complications, the fact that I'm pregnant with another man's child. Well, not a man I was involved with. But you know what I mean. But I can't help how I feel. Ethan took a careful breath, aware that what he said next would change everything. What if I feel the same way? What if I've been falling for you since the day you trusted me enough to share your fears about becoming a mother? What if when I look at you, I see someone I want to build a life with, complications and all? Alexandra turned back to him, hope and fear warring in her expression. Then we'd be two very stupid people about to do something that could blow up both our lives. Or we'd be two people brave enough to reach for something real, even when it's scary and complicated. They stared at each other, the air between them charged with possibility. Maya's laughter carried across the path, and somewhere a street musician played guitar, and the world kept spinning while they stood frozen in a moment that felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. I have to think about Oliver, Alexandra said finally, about what's best for him. Bringing someone into his life right from the start, that's a big decision. I know. And I have to think about Maya, about modeling healthy relationships for her versus rushing into something because it feels good in the moment. Ethan stepped closer, not touching, but close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her eyes. But I also think that teaching our kids to be brave enough to choose love when it shows up, even when the timing isn't perfect, that's valuable too. Our kids. Alexandra repeated the words softly, testing them out. That sounds nice. Scary, but nice. Everything worthwhile is scary. Doesn't mean it's not worth doing. Before either of them could say more, Maya came running back, breathless and grinning. There's an ice cream truck. Can we get ice cream? I know we just had dessert, but it's a special day and... She stopped, looking between them with sudden awareness. Are you guys okay? You look like you're having a serious talk. We're okay, Sunshine. Actually, we're better than okay. Ethan held out his hand to his daughter, then offered his other to Alexandra. Come on, let's get that ice cream. Alexandra took his hand, her fingers slipping between his like they belonged there. And for the first time since Sarah died, Ethan felt the pieces of his life clicking into place in a pattern he hadn't known he was looking for. They walked toward the ice cream truck like that, the three of them hand in hand, connected by choice and hope and the tentative beginning of something that might become a family. Maya chattered about flavors and toppings, oblivious to the significance of the moment, while Alexandra and Ethan exchanged glances over her head that promised later conversations, deeper acknowledgments, the scary and exhilarating work of building something new from the rubble of their separate losses. It wasn't perfect. The complications were real and substantial, but standing there in the June sunshine with Maya between them and Oliver kicking against Alexandra's palm where it rested on her belly, Ethan thought maybe perfect was overrated anyway. Maybe what mattered was showing up, being brave, and trusting that love could build bridges across even the most complicated circumstances. Maybe that rainy morning when he'd stopped to help a stranger hadn't just saved a life. It had started one, his own life, finally moving forward instead of just surviving. And as they stood in line for ice cream, arguing good-naturedly about whether chocolate or vanilla was superior, Ethan allowed himself to hope that this was just the beginning of their story, not the end. The weeks following their day at the lake brought a shift so subtle that if asked to pinpoint exactly when everything changed, Ethan wouldn't have been able to name a specific moment. It was more like watching ice melt, imperceptible, until suddenly the landscape was completely transformed. They didn't tell anyone at work about the evolution of their relationship. There was nothing official to tell anyway, just a growing intimacy that lived in the spaces between professional interactions. A hand lingering on a shoulder during a difficult phone call, coffee appearing on desks without being asked for, late nights at the office that ended with quiet conversations about hopes and fears, and the peculiar terror of trying to build something new while carrying the weight of past losses. Alexandra was now 34 weeks pregnant, and the physical toll was becoming impossible to hide. She moved more slowly, tired more easily, and had started working from home 2 days a week on Ethan's insistence. He'd blocked out time on her calendar for rest, scheduled her meetings to avoid the worst of rush hour traffic,
and generally made it his mission to ensure she made it to her due date without collapsing from exhaustion. "You're hovering," she told him one afternoon in early July, but there was affection in her voice rather than irritation. "I'm attentively present," he corrected, setting down a plate of fruit and crackers he'd assembled from the executive break room. "There's a difference." "Is there?" "Because it feels a lot like you're treating me like I'm made of glass." "Not glass, just extremely precious cargo that I'd prefer remained intact until Oliver makes his appearance." Ethan perched on the edge of her desk, close enough that their knees almost touched. "Humor me. I've never done the pregnancy support thing before. Sarah and I never got that far." The mention of Sarah made Alexandra's expression soften. She reached out and took his hand, threading their fingers together in a gesture that had become natural over the past weeks. "You would have been wonderful with her, just like you are with me." "I'm trying. Some days I feel like I'm doing everything wrong." "Welcome to parenthood. That feeling never goes away, apparently." She squeezed his hand. "My mother called again this morning. She wants to know when she can meet you properly, not just as my assistant, but as—" She paused, searching for the right word. "As what?" Ethan prompted gently. "As the person who matters to me. As the man I'm falling in love with." The words came out rushed, like she'd been holding them back and they'd finally escaped despite her best efforts. Ethan's heart stuttered in his chest. They danced around the word for weeks, implied it in 1,000 small ways, but neither had spoken it aloud until now. "You're falling in love with me? That terrifies you." It wasn't a question. She could read it in his face. "It doesn't terrify me." "Well, it does, but not for the reasons you think." He shifted closer, using his free hand to cup her face gently. "I'm terrified because I'm falling in love with you too, and I don't want to screw this up. I don't want to be another person who lets you down or can't handle the complexity of your life. You deserve someone who's all in, who's ready for everything that comes with you and Oliver." "Are you saying you're not ready?" "I'm saying I've never been more ready for anything in my life, and that absolutely terrifies me." He stroked his thumb across her cheekbone, marveling at the fact that he was allowed to touch her like this. "I love you, Alexandra. I love your strength and your vulnerability and the way you pretend to be invincible when you're actually just as scared as the rest of us. I love that you're building this company and growing this baby and somehow managing to make me feel like I matter in the middle of all of it." Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she laughed wetly. "You're not supposed to make a pregnant woman cry. It's considered poor form." "Sorry, want me to take it back?" "Don't you dare." She pulled him down into a kiss that tasted like salt and promise, and the beginning of something neither of them had thought they'd find again. When they finally broke apart, both breathing harder than they should be from a simple kiss, Alexandra rested her forehead against his. "So what do we do now? Where do we go from here?" "I think we tell people the truth, that we care about each other, that we're trying to figure out what this looks like." Ethan pulled back enough to meet her eyes. "And we take it slow, for Maya and Oliver's sake. No rushing into anything just because it feels good." "That's very mature and responsible of you." "One of us has to be. You're the one who just declared her feelings in the middle of a work day." "Fair point." She glanced at her computer screen where emails were piling up unread. "I should get back to work. The Tokyo merger won't negotiate itself." "Go home, Alexandra. Work from there this afternoon. You're exhausted, and pushing yourself isn't going to help anyone." When she opened her mouth to argue, he cut her off. "That's not a suggestion from someone who cares about you. That's a directive from your executive assistant who's looking at your schedule and seeing that you've been in meetings for 6 straight hours and still have a conference call at 4 that's going to run long." "When did you get so bossy?" "When I fell in love with someone who doesn't know when to stop." He kissed her forehead, quick and chaste. "Go home. Rest. I'll handle things here and call you if anything urgent comes up." She went, but not without grumbling about overprotective men and unnecessary coddling. Ethan watched her leave with a mixture of affection and concern. She was running herself ragged trying to prove she could do everything, run the company, grow a baby, maintain her independence, and he was terrified she'd push herself too far and something would break. The something broke 3 days later. Ethan was at home on a rare evening off, helping Maya with a science project about the solar system, when his phone rang with Alexandra's number. He answered immediately, already feeling dread coil in his stomach. Ethan. Her voice was tight with barely controlled panic. I need you. I'm at Northwestern Memorial. Something's wrong. He was on his feet before she finished speaking. What happened? Is Oliver at... I don't know. There's blood and cramping, and the doctors are running tests, but I'm only 36 weeks. It's too early, and I can't... Her voice broke. I can't do this alone. I know it's asking too much, but I'm coming. Right now. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He was already grabbing his keys, his mind racing. Maya's here, but I can call Mrs. Chen. Bring her, please. I don't want you to have to choose. He made it to the hospital in 15 minutes, breaking probably a dozen traffic laws in the process. Maya was silent in the back seat, her small face pinched with worry. She'd heard enough of the phone call to understand something was very wrong. They found Alexandra in a private room in labor and delivery, hooked up to monitors that beeped rhythmically. She looked small and frightened in the hospital bed, so different from the confident CEO who commanded boardrooms. When she saw them, relief flooded her face. You came. Of course I came. Ethan moved to her bedside immediately, taking her hand. It was cold and trembling. What are the doctors saying? Placental abruption. Not severe yet, but it could get worse quickly. They're monitoring me and Oliver, and if things deteriorate, they'll have to do an emergency C-section. Her grip on his hand was painfully tight. I'm so scared, Ethan. He's too early. What if something goes wrong? Maya, who'd been hovering uncertainly by the door, suddenly climbed up onto the bed and wrapped her small arms around Alexandra's neck. It's going to be okay. The doctors here are really good. They took care of my mommy lots of times, and Oliver is strong, I can tell. Alexandra clutched Maya like a lifeline, and Ethan watched his daughter offer comfort with a maturity that made his chest ache. This child who'd lost her own mother was sitting here reassuring another scared parent, giving freely of the empathy and strength she'd learned through her own grief. She's right, Ethan said quietly. Oliver is strong, and so are you. We're going to get through this together. Together. Alexandra repeated the word like a prayer. The hours that followed were a study in waiting and worry. Doctors came and went, checking monitors and asking questions. The situation remained stable but precarious. The abruption wasn't getting worse, but it also wasn't resolving. Oliver's heartbeat stayed strong, but they were watching carefully for any signs of distress. Ethan stayed at Alexandra's side, leaving only to take Maya to the cafeteria for dinner or to the bathroom. She refused to go home even when he suggested it, insisting that they needed to stay with Alexandra because she was family, and that's what families did. Around midnight, Maya finally fell asleep in the recliner chair, curled up under a blanket a kind nurse had provided. Alexandra watched her sleep with an expression of such tenderness it made Ethan's heart hurt. She's incredible, Alexandra whispered. You've raised an incredible human being. She likes you, a lot. She told me last week that she thinks you should be her new mom. Ethan said it lightly, but he was watching her face carefully. That's a big responsibility. What if I'm not good at it? What if I can't be what she needs? What if you can? What if you're exactly what both my kids need? He'd said it without thinking, and the word hung between them. Kids, plural, already claiming Oliver as his own. Your kids. Alexandra's voice was thick with emotion. You mean that? I love you. That means I love Oliver too. He's part of you, which makes him part of my life, if you'll let him be. Ethan stroked his thumb across her knuckles. I know it's fast. I know it's complicated, but I don't want to pretend anymore that I'm not invested in both of you. Before Alexandra could respond, an alarm started beeping on one of the monitors. Within seconds, medical staff flooded the room, all calm efficiency and medical terminology Ethan couldn't follow. He caught enough to understand that Oliver's heart rate had dropped, that the abruption was getting worse, that they needed to do an emergency C-section now. Ethan! Alexandra's eyes were wild with fear as they started wheeling her bed toward the operating room. I'm here. I'm right here. He walked alongside the bed, maintaining contact with her hand. You're going to be fine. Oliver's going to be fine. If something happens to me, nothing is going to happen to you. But if it does, promise me you'll tell Oliver about me. Tell him I wanted him so much, that choosing him was the best decision I ever made.
Tears streamed down her face. "And tell Maya thank you for sharing her dad with us. You're going to tell them both yourself because you're going to be fine." But Ethan's voice cracked on the last word. They reached the doors to the surgical suite, and a nurse stopped him gently. "I'm sorry, sir, but you can't go beyond this point. We'll update you as soon as we can." "She doesn't have anyone else here. Please." "I'll be with her the entire time," the nurse said kindly. "I promise she won't be alone." They wheeled Alexandra through the doors, and Ethan stood frozen, watching until she disappeared from view. Then his legs gave out and he slid down the wall to sit on the floor, his head in his hands. This was his worst nightmare. Losing someone he loved in a hospital, being powerless to protect them, having to wait while doctors decided whether his world would shatter. He'd been here before with Sarah, had lived through this exact hell, and the fact that he was here again felt like some kind of cosmic joke. "Daddy?" Maya's small voice came from down the hall. She must have woken up and found him gone. "Where's Mrs. Alexandra?" "She's in surgery, Sunshine. The doctors have to deliver Oliver now because they're worried about both of them." He pulled Maya into his lap, needing her solid warmth to anchor him. "We have to wait." "Is she going to die like Mommy?" The blunt question felt like a knife to the chest. No, Sunshine, she's going to be fine. The doctors here are very good, and she's strong, and..." His voice broke and he couldn't finish. Maya wrapped her arms around his neck and squeezed tight. "It's okay to be scared, Daddy. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It just means you don't let the scared stop you." He held his daughter and tried to believe her wisdom, tried to have faith that the universe wouldn't be cruel enough to give him love again just to rip it away. But as the minutes turned to hours with no update, that faith became harder and harder to maintain. At some point, Margaret Cross arrived, breathless and terrified, having been called by the hospital. She took one look at Ethan's face and seemed to understand everything that had remained unspoken between him and her daughter. "You love her." It wasn't a question. "Yes." "And Maya?" She glanced at the child sleeping fitfully against Ethan's shoulder. "Alexandra wanted her here. She considers us family." Margaret's expression softened. "Then I'm glad she has you, that she's not facing this alone anymore." She sat down next to him, back against the wall, looking suddenly older than her years. "I've lost 2 grandchildren already. I can't..." Her voice broke. "I can't lose my daughter too." "You won't. She's a fighter. She's the strongest person I've ever met." Ethan said it with more confidence than he felt, but Margaret seemed to need the reassurance. They waited together as night bled into early morning. Maya woke, slept, woke again. Nurses brought terrible coffee that they drank anyway. And with every minute that passed without news, Ethan felt his anxiety ratchet higher. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime but was actually 3 hours, a doctor in surgical scrubs approached them. Ethan was on his feet immediately, his heart in his throat. "Ms. Cross is out of surgery and stable, Sadake. Topisha, Shikame," the doctor said, and Ethan's knees nearly buckled with relief. "The abruption was significant, but we were able to deliver the baby safely. He's in the NICU being evaluated. He's very small at 36 weeks and having some breathing difficulties, but his vitals are stable." "Can we see her?" Margaret's voice was raw. "She's in recovery now. Give us another hour to get her settled, and then you can visit, 2 at a time in the NICU for the baby." After the doctor left, Ethan sat back down heavily, all the tension draining out of him at once. They were alive. Both of them were alive. The relief was so intense it physically hurt. "Thank you," Margaret said softly, "for being here, for caring about my daughter enough to sit through this with us." "There's nowhere else I would be." They were allowed to see Alexandra an hour later. She was pale and groggy from anesthesia, but her eyes were clear and alert when they found Ethan standing in the doorway of her recovery room. "Oliver?" Her voice was hoarse. "He's okay. Small, having some trouble breathing, but the doctor said his vitals are stable. They have him in the NICU." Ethan moved to her bedside, taking her hand carefully. "You scared the hell out of me." "I scared myself." She tried to smile, but it came out shaky. "They won't let me see him yet, not until I'm more stable, but I need..." Her voice broke. "I need to know he's real, that he's here, and alive."
I'll go. I'll take pictures and videos and come right back and tell you everything. Ethan looked at Margaret. Can you stay with her? Of course. The NICU was a maze of beeping machines and tiny isolates, each containing impossibly small humans fighting impossibly large battles. A nurse directed Ethan to Oliver's station, and he found himself staring down at the smallest person he'd ever seen. Oliver was tiny, barely 5 pounds according to the chart, with a shock of dark hair and features that were unmistakably Alexandra's. He had tubes and wires attached to his small body, monitoring everything, helping him breathe through lungs that weren't quite ready for the world yet. But his eyes were open, dark, and alert, staring up at Ethan with an intensity that stole his breath. "Hi, Oliver," Ethan whispered. "I'm Ethan. He paused, unsure how to finish that sentence. "I'm here because your mom is the bravest person I know, and she fought really hard to get you here safely. And I promised her I'd check on you and tell you that she loves you more than anything." Oliver's tiny hand flexed, fingers spreading and closing. Without thinking, Ethan reached into the isolette carefully, so carefully, and let Oliver's hand wrap around his finger. The grip was surprisingly strong for someone so small. "You're a fighter too, I see." "That's good. You're going to need that." Ethan's voice was thick with emotion. "Your mom is worried about you, so you need to keep fighting, okay? Keep breathing, keep getting stronger because she needs you. We all need you." He took photos and a short video documenting Oliver's perfectly formed features and the steady rise and fall of his small chest. Then he reluctantly extracted his finger from that tiny grip and headed back to Alexandra's room. She was more alert when he returned, sitting up slightly in bed with Margaret hovering nearby. Her eyes locked on his phone the moment he walked in. "Show me. Please show me my baby." Ethan pulled up the photos and videos and watched Alexandra's face transform as she saw her son for the first time. Tears streamed freely down her face, and Margaret was crying too, relief and joy and fear all tangled together. "He's perfect," Alexandra whispered. "He's so perfect and tiny. And—" She looked up at Ethan. "You met him. What's he like?" "Strong, alert. He grabbed my finger and wouldn't let go." Ethan sat on the edge of her bed carefully. "He has your eyes and your stubborn determination. I told him to keep fighting because his mom needs him." "What did you tell him you were when you introduced yourself?" There was vulnerability in the question, a need to know how Ethan saw himself in their lives. "I told him I was there because you're the bravest person I know. I didn't want to presume." "Presume." Alexandra reached for his hand. "Please presume. I want you to be part of his life, Ethan. Not as my assistant or my friend, but as someone who matters. Someone who chooses to be here even when it's hard." "I'm not going anywhere. You're stuck with me now." He squeezed her hand gently. "Both of you are stuck with me." Margaret cleared her throat delicately. "I'm going to get some coffee and check on Maya. Give you two a moment." She kissed Alexandra's forehead. "I'm so glad you're okay, darling." After she left, Ethan and Alexandra sat in comfortable silence for a moment, just holding hands and breathing through the relief of survival. "This wasn't how I imagined Oliver's birth," Alexandra said finally. "I thought I'd have more time to prepare, more time to figure everything out. Life doesn't usually wait for us to be ready. It just happens, and we figure it out as we go." Ethan brushed a strand of hair back from her face. "But for what it's worth, I think you're going to be an amazing mom. Even flat on your back in a hospital bed, recovering from emergency surgery, your first thought was for him. That's what good parents do." "I couldn't do this without you. Tonight proved that. When I was scared and everything was falling apart, you were the person I called." She held his gaze. "I need you to understand what that means. I've been independent my whole life, convinced I didn't need anyone. And then you showed up and made me realize that needing people isn't weakness. It's just being human. I need you too. You and Oliver both. You've given me a reason to believe in second chances, in building something new from broken pieces." He leaned down and kissed her forehead gently. "I love you, Alexandra Cross, and I love that tiny fighter in the NICU who grabbed my finger and wouldn't let go." "Sounds like you're already wrapped around his finger." "Completely, just like I'm wrapped around yours." They smiled at each other,
exhausted and emotional and hopeful in the way that only comes after surviving something terrifying together. Over the next week, Alexandra slowly recovered while Oliver fought his small battles in the NICU. His breathing improved daily, and the doctors became increasingly optimistic about his prognosis. Ethan split his time between the hospital and home, trying to maintain some normalcy for Maya, while supporting Alexandra through the strange limbo of being a new mother separated from her baby. Maya visited every day after school, bringing drawings for Oliver's isolette, and chattering to him through the plastic about all the things they'd do together when he was bigger. The NICU nurses fell in love with her, and several commented that Oliver seemed to respond to her voice, his little hand reaching toward the sound. "He knows I'm his sister," Maya announced with absolute certainty. "Not the regular kind, but the chosen kind. That's even better because we picked each other." It was Maya, actually, who forced the conversation about their future. She'd been patient for days, watching the adults dance around the obvious, until finally she'd had enough. "Are you and Ms. Alexandra going to get married?" she asked Ethan one evening over pizza. They'd fallen back into Pizza Thursday despite everything, needing the normalcy of routine. Ethan nearly choked on his slice. "That's a pretty big question, Sunshine." "It's a yes or no question, actually. Or, I don't know if you really don't." She fixed him with a look that was pure Sarah, direct and unwilling to accept deflection. "Because if you are, I need to know so I can start planning what I'm going to wear. And if you're not, then I need to know why not, because you love her, and she loves you, and Oliver needs a dad, and I want a brother, so it seems like everyone wins." "Maya, you told me that Mommy would want you to be happy again. You told me she made you promise not to be alone forever." Maya's voice was steady, far too mature for 8 years old. "Ms. Alexandra makes you happy. I can tell because you smile different now, like you mean it all the way through instead of just on the outside. And she needs you, and Oliver needs you, and I want them to be our family. So why are you waiting?" The simple logic of it, the clarity of a child who hadn't learned to complicate things with fear and what-ifs, hit Ethan like a physical blow. "You're right. You're absolutely right. So you're going to ask her to marry you?" "Eventually, when the timing is right. After Oliver comes home and Alexandra is fully recovered and—" "Daddy." Maya put down her pizza and took his hand, looking at him with eyes that held Sarah's wisdom. "The timing is never going to be perfect. That's what Mrs. Chen says. She says, if you wait for perfect, you'll wait forever. She says sometimes you just have to jump and trust the net will appear." "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise. You just don't always listen." She squeezed his hand. "Go ask her, tonight, before you talk yourself out of it." "I can't ask her tonight. She's recovering from surgery. Oliver is still in the NICU. "So you'll ask her there, in Oliver's room. That way all of us can be together when you do it." Maya grinned, clearly pleased with her planning. "That's romantic. Way better than some fancy restaurant where everyone stares at you." Ethan found himself laughing despite the terror thrumming through his veins. "You've got this all figured out, don't you?" "Someone has to. You grown-ups take forever to do anything." She stood up, grabbing her plate. "Come on, let's go get Miss Chen to take us to that jewelry store near her apartment. The one with the pretty rings in the window." "Maya, I can't just buy a ring tonight." "Why not? You have money now, and you love her, and she loves you, and tomorrow isn't promised, Daddy. Mommy taught us that." The stark reminder silenced any argument Ethan might have made. She was right. Tomorrow wasn't promised. He'd learned that lesson in the cruelest way possible. And if he'd learned anything from losing Sarah and almost losing Alexandra this week, it was that when you found something worth fighting for, you didn't wait for the perfect moment. You grabbed it with both hands and held on. 2 hours later, Ethan stood outside the NICU with a ring box in his pocket and Maya bouncing excitedly beside him. It wasn't a fancy ring. He couldn't afford anything extravagant despite his better salary, but it was beautiful in its simplicity. A single diamond on a white gold band that had called to him the moment he saw it. "You've got this, Daddy," Maya whispered as they scrubbed in. "Just tell her how you feel. Girls like that stuff." They found Alexandra in Oliver's room, sitting in the rocking chair beside his isolette, with him finally in her arms for the first time. He'd been doing well enough that morning for kangaroo care, and the sight of mother and son together stole Ethan's breath. Alexandra looked up when they entered, her face glowing with a joy he'd never seen before. "Look at him. He's really here. He's really real. He's perfect."
Ethan moved closer, struck by how natural Alexandra looked as a mother, how right it all felt. "How are you feeling?" "Sore, exhausted, happier than I've ever been in my life." She adjusted Oliver slightly, his small head tucked against her chest. "The doctors say if he keeps improving, we might be able to take him home next week." "That's wonderful." Ethan glanced at Maya, who made exaggerated, encouraging gestures at him. "Alexandra, can I talk to you about something?" "Of course, everything okay?" "More than okay, it's just—" He took a breath, feeling the weight of the ring box in his pocket. "Maya said something tonight that made me realize I've been overthinking this. Waiting for the perfect moment when really, this right here, right now, is already perfect." Alexandra's expression shifted to something uncertain and hopeful. "Ethan, what are you—" He pulled out the ring box and dropped to one knee beside her chair, aware of how surreal this must look, proposing in a NICU while she held her week-old son. But Maya was right. This was them. This was their life, messy and complicated and absolutely right. "I'm not good at speeches, so I'm just going to say this plainly. I love you. I love Oliver. I love the family we're building together from broken pieces and second chances. You make me want to be brave again, to believe in futures instead of just surviving the present." His voice cracked with emotion. "Will you marry me? Will you let me be Oliver's father and Maya's mother and build this beautiful, complicated, imperfect life together?" Tears streamed down Alexandra's face as she looked from the ring to Oliver to Maya, who was crying too, and back to Ethan. "Yes. God, yes. I can't think of anything I want more." Ethan slipped the ring on her finger with shaking hands, then leaned up to kiss her carefully, mindful of Oliver between them. Maya threw her arms around both of them, and for a moment they stayed like that, the four of them wrapped in an embrace that felt like coming home. "We're a family now," Maya announced to Oliver, who blinked up at all of them with those alert dark eyes. "You and me and Daddy and your mom, the best kind of family because we all chose each other." And she was right. That was exactly what they were. The months that followed were a blur of adjustment and joy, and the particular chaos that comes with blending lives and families. Oliver came home from the hospital after 2 weeks, small but thriving, and Maya appointed herself his personal protector and entertainment director. Alexandra's recovery was slower than she wanted, but Ethan enforced rest periods and meal times with the same determination he'd shown as her assistant. They decided to wait to get married until Oliver was older, until Alexandra was fully healed, until they could plan something that felt right. But they moved in together almost immediately, finding a house with enough space for all of them and a yard where Maya could play and Oliver could eventually explore. The wedding, when it finally happened on a crisp October afternoon, was small and perfect. Just family and close friends gathered in the garden of their new home. Maya served as maid of honor, carrying Oliver down the aisle in a baby carrier decorated with flowers. Margaret wept through the entire ceremony. And when Ethan and Alexandra exchanged vows, promising to honor the past while building toward the future, there wasn't a dry eye in attendance. "I promise to love you through the hard days and the beautiful ones," Ethan said, his voice steady despite his emotion. "I promise to be a father to Oliver, to raise him with the same love Sarah and I would have raised our children. I promise to be a partner to you in all things, to remind you to rest when you work too hard, and to always, always stop when someone needs help, even if it makes me late." Alexandra laughed through her tears. "I promise to love you and Maya and our future children with everything I have. I promise to build a life with you that honors both our pasts and embraces our future. And I promise that whenever you're running late because you stopped to help someone, I'll never fire you for it." The crowd laughed, and then they were kissing, sealing promises that had been forged in rain and fear and the particular alchemy that turns strangers into family. At the reception, Maya gave a toast that left everyone weeping. "My mommy died when I was 5, she said, her small voice carrying clearly in the quiet garden, and for a long time, I thought that meant we could never be happy again. But then my daddy met Alexandra on a rainy day, and he was late for work because he stopped to help her. And because he was brave enough to help someone even when it was hard, we found our family again." She turned to Oliver, who was sleeping peacefully in Margaret's arms. "Oliver, you're too little to understand this now, but
Your mom chose to have you all by herself because she was brave too. And now you have a dad who chose you just as much as she did. And you have me, your big sister, who's going to teach you everything important like how to ride a bike and how to make daddy laugh when he's sad." Then she looked at Alexandra and Ethan, her eyes shining with tears and hope. "Mommy told Daddy before she died that she wanted him to be happy again. I think she would be really happy about this, about all of us. Because love doesn't end when people die. It just makes room for new love too." There wasn't a dry eye in the garden, and when Maya finished, Alexandra pulled her into a fierce hug, whispering something in her ear that made Maya nod and squeeze tighter. Later, as the sun set and the party wound down, Ethan found himself standing alone for a moment, watching his new wife dance with his daughter, while his son slept peacefully nearby. The scene was so perfect, it almost hurt, and he felt Sarah's presence like a whisper on the wind. "Thank you," he said quietly to the memory of his first love, "for making me promise, for pushing me to live instead of just survive. I hope you're proud of the life we've built." He felt no response, but he didn't need one. He could feel Sarah's blessing in the weight of the ring on his finger, in Maya's laughter, in the way Alexandra looked at him like he'd hung the moon. She had given him permission to love again, and he'd been brave enough to take it. 6 months later, on a spring morning that echoed that rainy day in Chicago, Alexandra went into labor with their second child. This time there were no complications, no emergencies, just the ordinary miracle of bringing life into the world. Ethan stayed by her side through every contraction, every push, every moment of the journey they were taking together. When their daughter was born, small and perfect and screaming with fury at being evicted from her comfortable home, Alexandra looked at Ethan with exhausted joy. "What should we name her?" she asked. Ethan looked at his new daughter, at his wife, at the beautiful, complicated family they'd built from loss and rain and one impossible choice to stop and help. "What about hope? Because that's what you gave me when I'd forgotten what it felt like." Alexandra's eyes filled with tears. "Hope Cross Cole, it's perfect." And it was. All of it was perfect in its imperfection. The blended family, the love built from broken pieces, the life they'd created by being brave enough to reach for second chances. As Ethan held his newborn daughter and watched Maya carefully show Oliver how to be gentle with his baby sister, as Alexandra rested with her hand in his, and contentment written across her face, he thought about that rainy morning that had changed everything. He'd been racing the clock, terrified of being fired, certain his life was falling apart. And then he'd seen a stranger who needed help. And he'd made a choice that seemed small in the moment, but turned out to be the most important decision of his life. He'd stopped. He'd helped. He'd been brave. And in return, he'd found not just a job, not just security, but a family, a future, a love that healed old wounds while creating space for new joy. Sometimes the woman you save on the side of the road isn't just your boss. Sometimes she's the answer to prayers you didn't know you were praying. Sometimes she's the home you never thought you'd find again. And sometimes, if you're very lucky and very brave, stopping to help a stranger in the rain becomes the first step toward a life more beautiful than any you could have imagined. That's exactly what happened to Ethan Cole on a rainy Tuesday morning in Chicago. He stopped. He helped. He loved. And it changed everything.